This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
All right, I'm calling to order the meeting of the Southampton Select Board for February 11th at 6 o'clock p.m. If we could stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. We have our small flag here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. Well, tonight we have the beginnings of our budget hearings for FY26. We have our select board members here. John is out of town, actually on work business, and I'm thinking Stephen is coming, but I believe that will be happening. And we also have our finance committee members here tonight. They will not be having a quorum for discussion purposes. We have our town administrator, Scott, who's going to lead us through this process, and Bradley, our town accountant, who's been working hand in hand with Scott to unravel things. And then we've got our various presentations tonight. So we have our first 2, 4, 6 departments or divisions, shall we say, to present tonight. So we're going to do in order. We have library, park commission, cemetery commission, town accountant, assessor, and the building department tonight. So that's the plan. So with that, I'm going to let Scott kind of give us a bit of an overview of how this is going to work, because it's all a little bit different than what we had in the past, how we've done this in the past, and especially with a brand new budget book scenario and organization. Hi, Stephen. Hello. All right, so we are recording, and like I say, this will be put up on our website in a couple of days once Easthampton Media collects the card and does their thing. So go ahead, Scott, let's turn it over to you.
Yep. Well, welcome to budget season 25.
Yeah.
Right after football season. So my 3 words I was looking forward to kind of form the budget this year was efficiency, transparency, and responsibility. Efficiency, I wanted to make sure that it's easier to do the budget, but that requires a little bit of forward capital, and eventually we'll get that return on investment. So hopefully this will pay off over the next couple of years. Transparency, because obviously we're a public entity and we need to make sure that when we ask the voters for money and the citizens, we make sure that it's transparent, that the information is available. So I set up the website, but also it's understandable. So it's one thing just to throw out all the spreadsheets, it's another thing to actually make sense of it all. And then responsible for the taxpayer monies, obviously, but also to the employees and all the volunteers to make sure that they have the necessary things that they need to succeed in their jobs and their responsibilities and their goals. So, unfortunately, if the school department was level funded, we'd be all set and we could all go home. Unfortunately, we are anticipating an increase in the school department. That's nothing new. So we are going to be looking to making some cuts to the budget and the requests. Hampshire Regional last night, their preliminary numbers were a little under $400,000 increase, which is about 6.8%. Norris School, it's still in development, but obviously I expect that to come in for at least a few percentage points. How much, right now we're still not 100% sure, how much we're going to need to cut, but it's going to be in the 6 figures.
Mm-hmm.
Scott, what's driving the increase?
Health insurance is a big one.
Transportation, I think, is the other.
Transportation. There's a lot of cleanup that the central office have done, a lot of things that they've discovered that weren't being paid appropriately or were being paid not appropriately. Yeah. So that's a lot of it. If you look on the presentation I posted on the FY26 budget page from the school department, which is these right here, they actually go into some pretty good detail about all the drivers. So it's really good.
Yeah. I think transportation, insurance is certainly one of the big ones. And we just one of the school committee members just popped in, so we're going to have them somebody, Margaret Larson or someone else too, will probably come from Hampshire Regional and just give us an overview of where they are. And from what I understood, that's hopefully, you know, the worst case that we can expect. She said that they don't have all the revenues plugged in yet, so hopefully there's a little bit brighter scenario, but there definitely will need to be some budget tightening here, I'm sure. But we'll have her come in on our regular select board meeting on the 18th and give us kind of an overview of what the budget is looking like for the school. So right before we do the other hearings on the 18th, we'll have her give us an overview of what it's looking like from their perspective. But go ahead, Scott.
So just to put that in dollars and cents, essentially right now, every 1% of our entire school budget is equal to about $130,000 that we're going to have to reduce. So,
is that big enough for people? Can you see
I don't know if you can see that.
Kind of, sort of.
Some changes to the FY26 budget. So we reorganized a lot of the departmental budgets. We consolidated where we could, so things such as like maintenance, custodial work. We started a townwide IT plan, and we also consolidated things like our waste disposal. So instead of having each facility having their own budget, having to do the process to give Randall the money at the transfer station, we just consolidate into one expense so that we can make it a little bit easier. Because of the reorganization, a lot of the numbers are going to be a little bit up and down. So some of the percentages and the number of variances that you're going to see aren't truly accurate because they haven't carried over from last year. Revenues are still being worked on, but hopefully next week we're going to have a little bit of a clearer picture. We have the governor's budget, you know, that's been in. We do have our property tax increases. We have things like that. We're finishing up revenues for the first 6 months of FY25. That'll give us a little bit of a better picture on our estimates for those. And then we're going to put those together and we're going to go over the revenues. And one of the things that we're looking at as well is looking at special accounts, grants, trusts that we need to look at. Bradley did a really great job over the last couple weeks putting together, going through with a fine-tooth comb, all of our different accounts. And we have some that are decades old that have money in it. So we have some, these are grants or other special revenues that have never been expended. So these are just for special revenues. There's a significant amount.
That's the capital one, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
These are revenue. So things, we have to address each one of these individually and figure out what the money's for. Could we use it for something else? Was it a grant? Do we have to send the money back to the state or the federal government? Or can we use it for something else? So some of this goes back, you know, close to 9-10 years.
Yeah, it's crazy too because a lot of the grants that we get, for those who may not know, most of the grants that we get are reimbursable. There's very rarely that we get a grant where we get the money and you can just do it, and if you don't use it all, more power to you. If you're, you know, if you're economical in what you do, but most of these are reimbursable. So you might get a $50,000 grant, but you only get reimbursed for what you put in for receipts. So some of these that still have a balance, it's a question mark as to whatever happened here. So there's a lot of research that has to be done on some of these.
And then also capital projects. So there's a lot of money that is available. Everything from the computer network server from 6 years ago, $7,500, to highway plow that from 2020, and so on. So it's quite a bit of money.
So do we have the cash, or is it just an obligation of who's ever pledging that we can pull the money down if we do what we're supposed to do?
This would probably be against our capital budget. So we
pulled from the capital stabilization
Right.
account to make these projects.
So these are all encumbered against what we would look at our total. So just when you're looking at the budget, you know, just some quick things by the numbers. You know, currently our operating stabilization fund is at $950,000. I would love to get to over $1 million. That's 5%. The recommended amount is 10% of your total budget. So we're very far from that, and we won't be able to get that this year. But you know, the recommended from the DLS is to get that 10% built up into stabilization. Our capital stabilization is at $350,000. Last year's budget was $21 million. Our compensation adjustments, which are taken into effect for January for the salary plan, and will be effective again in July 1st will be $75,000. And our schools make up about 62% of the budget, so that's why I stress that our schools are the biggest cost driver against the town.
So, the stabilization account and the slide before that, are those encumbrances against the stabilization, the capital fund, that can be released and it's just a paper thing? Or is it actually found money in some way that benefits us on a cash basis?
Bradley?
Capital Stabilization Fund, we fund it through an article at a town meeting,
Right.
usually through free cash, giving it money. And then we dip into it also through an article at a town meeting for projects.
So like the library $7,000 from last town meeting for
Yes.
their lighting project, that reduced the capital stabilization fund by $7,000.
There are interests that over the year does slightly increase the stabilization funds, but mostly it's transfers into it from an article.
So with the appropriate authorization, it goes where?
It goes into the money goes into the stabilization fund and then comes out through a vote at a town meeting for
Cool.
capital or operating
Okay, for
stabilization.
anything of that.
Yep.
Okay.
It's actual money though.
I have a question too, regarding the fact that the school budgets take up such a high percentage of our entire budget. We hear a lot about unfunded mandates, and I know this isn't the time to debate what's going on at the State House, but is there hope, do you think, for some of the, like, being a rural community and having to bus our students to Hampshire Regional and those kinds of things? Is there hope?
Before we even talk about that.
That might be better for Representative Peace Vilas, but I know that we have a good stabilization fund. I do see some storms on the horizon.
Storms. We don't calm seas. We don't calm seas at
I know,
night.
on the state level at least, but
Yeah.
but I don't know if there'll be too much relief this year or not.
Okay.
I mean, the governor's budget was released, so, and it wasn't a huge increase. So just some numbers, just especially around insurance, some of the soft costs. When you're looking at the staffing levels, so you become benefit eligible at 20 plus hours a week. So you might have heard 19 and a half, 20, so right around that mark. So once you start working 20 hours plus regularly, you become benefits eligible. And that means you're entitled to our health insurance, but also our dental insurance, our OPEB, on and on and on. So by adding a employee, it also comes with the cost of $20,000, $16,000, or $7,000 for, depending on which level of plan that they take, for health insurance. And this health insurance this year, we're looking at an 18% plus increase. So we'll go with the library first. So some things just to keep in mind with the library. So the library is a little bit of a unique budget because they have a state required minimum funding for materials, which is based on a percentage. Joanna, you can probably explain a little bit better if you could. But one thing that we did do is we moved the custodian salary into the maintenance budget. So the 5 or 6 hours that Dave usually works, we put it into combined 19 hours for both town hall, library, and the police department. And there are other things of note, an increase of hours for employees to become benefits eligible. So let me bring it up. You want your...
Yes, thank you. Thank you to the Select Board and the Finance Committee and everybody who's here. And also behind me are Jessica and Kristen, who are on the board and the trustees of the library. I'm so thrilled that they were able to come tonight. So we've been working on this sort of as a team, which has been a very different experience than I had in the past when I presented budgets to you all. Scott and Bradley and I have been able to meet and actually talk about it. And so this is going to be a more show you rather than tell you sort of evening. And so up there, that's going to be our major piece from 2024. It's part of our COVID recovery. You can see the total circulations that we had, how many physical items we own, How much do we lend to other libraries? And a lot of that stuff is, you know, you might expect that from a big library consortium system. But what you also get, because I have to report this in one of my reports, is real use of money. How many programs we have had. So how many times the meeting room was used. How many people attended events. How many children were able to have a great start of their life and their relationship with the library. So as I continue with the budget presentation, I just wanted that card to be up there as I continue on.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
Just the one that hits me, the 197 events. Just give us a sample of what do you define as an event?
So, so if we looked at, let's say, January, so every week the quilters meet, the Girl Scouts meet to use the conference room.
Okay.
There's Lego Club. There's meetings that I don't include the trustees and the friends, for example, in that.
So it's basically the use of your community room?
It's not just that, though. It's also including story time and groups that come in to use the meeting room, certainly, but also programs that
the
we
library
have.
puts out. Okay.
Exactly. For example, with the Good Earth Gardeners, that's like a big event. That we hope to have again in April, the one that was that didn't happen in January.
Right.
But even just this week, so we'll probably have 5 events every week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
The comma in one comma, 677 attendees,
Yeah.
is really small.
It is. I don't know what happened there.
Or maybe it's just me. but-
How do you do 0.67 of them?
Only got 0.67.
Yeah.
Children are only percentages. No, it's
You don't want
exactly.
people walking away with that
That's
impression.
true. You know what? I don't know what happened with that comment.
It's a graphic thing. I
There you
don't
go.
know.
No, it's
Well, it
nice.
should have been a count, 1,677.
No, nicely.
You know
nicely
what,
done.
though? It was, maybe I slipped my finger.
There you
Made
go.
a mistake, but thank you for that. So it's
Auto error was on my
1,677.
computer.
Yes. So that actually, but you point that out though, Stephen, and that's adult programs. And so below that, then you also have
Oh, plus,
176 programs for children 0 to 18.
That's great.
So, and how many children attended those programs? And so especially like with, let's say the youth summer reading program where we're having, 4 events for children each week, and then just the general sign up, these things can really add up.
Right.
So anyway, so again, showing rather than telling, but I do have to tell certain things. So for the budget narrative, do you want me to just continue on with,
Sure.
with the?
I was going to just put up the regular budget.
Yeah, that's fine, thank you. So, an explanation of what we came up with as we look at the budget, the significant numbers. I applaud the select board for its efforts to bring wages up to a competitive level. The increase in our total budget is almost entirely due to the increases in salaries. The library has a responsibility not only to the town of Southampton, but also to the state of Massachusetts, as you know, and this is speaking to the MAR. By state mandate, we need to achieve a minimum municipal appropriations requirement. And the MAR is a calculation of the 3 previous years' MARs or Tammy's town appropriated municipal income, whichever is higher, divided by 3 and multiplied by 1.025%. And that's how we get state aid. So when Scott was going through all of the money that you could see sort of outstanding state, you might have seen library state grant, and that's, last year, unfortunately I don't have the number in front of me, but I think it was like $17,000 that we got from the state because I have to do the 2 large reports in the summer. And that's a really great sort of return for the library, is that. But, so if you look at the library personnel, And unfortunately, I have very poor eyesight, so I can't really speak to the number up there, so I'm just gonna have to rifle through on my budget. But Scott and Bradley and I worked on that, and it looks like I'm getting an increase per what they suggested for that rate. And then the other increases for the staff are also noted there. Now.
And then the substitutes as well.
And the substitutes as well, thank you. This year, of course, we still had the custodian in our budget. Next year, that's going to be a separate line. So our total requested compensation, and again, this number at the end, Scott, if you can switch it over.
For the personnel?
Yeah, that 163,228.45, I think has a little bit of play in it because I don't know what the total compensation is really for FY26. But again, that's our increase in budget is largely about that increase in salaries. As we go to page 2, we see that we have library expenses, which are, I'm holding steady on those. Those are principally day-to-day costs, paper, toner, supplies. Books and materials is another mathematical theorem from this day. Our books and materials need to be 19% of our total budget. And so that goes up a little bit, as you can see, because of the total budget going up. And in fact, because of the salaries going up next pay period, I need to actually find another $1,000, which I've written and received $500 already from Easthampton Savings Bank to help with that, to get me to that 19%. The utilities, that's a wild card. And we're hoping that our lighting project, which was completed and looks fantastic, and we have a little bit of leftover money from that, we're hoping that that will help keep our utilities in check in the long run. And our maintenance costs are another sort of wild card, but we're sort of just going with the copy machine rental, our website maintenance, because we do the the Southampton Historical Resources, as well as the library, the biannual HVAC maintenance, etc. So at this point, I can pause and ask you if you have any questions about what you're seeing or hearing.
So I think it looks like you've got certainly a change in personnel here, right?
Yes.
What you're asking for.
Yes.
I'm not sure that came out in your presentation. So you have 3 that are benefit eligible right now, and then you've got
I was asking for
one that's under 20
Yeah.
hours, and you want to move that one up to more than 20 hours. So that's
Yes.
what takes you up into the 4 staffing at that level?
Right. So one of our goals and initiatives, Chris, in FY26 is that we want to see an intensification of our efforts to create the library for the 21st century. And to do this, we need to create a long-range plan. We haven't had a long-range plan since 2012. So I cannot do it all. I need help. The working document of a long-range plan will help us create goals and increase our services. We've already begun this process by creating surveys, we've gotten grants, we've made all these initiatives. I do better with a template, and that's why I'm requesting that Emily Menska receive more hours so that we can have more of a dedicated circulation desk person so that I can spend less time on the circulation desk. And
So that one position is the
that's
circulation?
the one, yes, that's the circulation position.
This is the head of circulation.
Okay. So that would go from 25 hours, well,
That would go from
19 to
19.
25.
19 to 25, I'm sorry.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
So just something to consider, and that's, but I just wanted to give you the reasoning behind why I think that would be a great a great move for us.
So does that increase, make her eligible for insurances?
Yes, it does.
It does.
And do people always take them, or
I don't.
We have to assume that they do,
you
though.
have to assume that they do?
You have to assume that
Yeah,
they do, but
you have to budget accordingly, but some people are on their spouse's plan or something, and they may not take it always.
myself and another staff member do not take.
But as Scott was saying, that's probably another 20,000 thereabouts.
Right.
It's a little bit of a tricky situation. Essentially, if they took a family plan, you'd be doubling the cost to the town, which I'm not in favor of a lot of part-timers. I've had a problem. I think you get a more dedicated staff that's available long-term if you have full-time workers instead of multiple part-timers filling positions to save on health insurance costs. I do think that we kind of have to, it is in that gray area, so if at 19 hours you're not benefit eligible, but at 25 you are. So what's the return on the investment for offering benefits? Should they be 30 plus or 35, or should they be 40? So it's just kind of food for thought.
And is it a one-time thing that you need the help, or do you see your needs continuing?
I actually would love to have it obviously continue because honestly, I would love to be able to do more research on grants. And I love convincing the public. It's my favorite part of the job. But, between the amount of work that a director has to do, the fact that I don't attend a lot of meetings because I simply can't leave the library. We have to have 2 people in the library at all times for safety. I just think it could be a win-win situation. And so I just wanted to toss that into this budget. And it is about a position and not a person, but I think that in this case, the person is also really valuable to the library. Go ahead.
Also, if you're talking about efficiency, if you have a director who's working on the front desk, you're paying somebody $35 an hour versus somebody $20 an hour to do the same job.
So my question is sort of the flip side of your question, which is, I'm reading a paragraph here about long-range plan, forward-facing, steady upward trend on circulations, et cetera, and you've already documented the upward trend that started very successfully. I personally think your library is wonderful and love to go. I don't go often enough because I'm only 24 hours in a day. But I will say that I would anticipate that you get good people in these roles and you are going to be able to utilize them a little more broadly with their expertise, not to be the director, but to sort of enact the kinds of things you want. Which is what Southampton, as a community where we are located between cities and major metropolitan areas, we need to be that kind of town that has those kinds of things.
Honestly, when I first moved to Easthampton, everybody was telling me, don't move there, it's the pets. And we went there anyway, and I started going to the Envision Easthampton meetings. This is way back in the early 2000s. And did you go to those? It was like wild. You could not envision what was on the table in front of you. And they were able to do it, generally speaking.
You have to have the visions too.
You have to have a vision, or else you're just going to do what I feel somewhat like that we have been doing. We're researching, we're trying, but we're a little bit spinning our wheels. I can make a community garden. Do people really want a community garden? I haven't even asked. We're working on this library of things, and we did a survey because you're like, we got money for library of things. Well, what do people want? So that's part of the exploration of that. So I wanted to put that out there as something to consider.
So back on the total with the MER versus the MAR, if I've got this right?
Yeah.
So your request for us tonight is $229,000 altogether,
Yes.
of which if I'm understanding this, 40 42, just the books and materials?
Yes.
42 has to be that 19%. I think it's a little bit less, but that's okay, as long as it's like 18 points.
Because I can, if it's a little bit less, that's fine. You see, as I said, like, for this year, let's say it was supposed to be 38,000, because we had the increase, it went up to 39,000, so I had to find $1,000, and I feel comfortable with that amount.
Personally, I would like to see us giving or budgeting for the full 19%. That's a state requirement.
Yeah.
I don't
It's
think
close,
we
it's
should-
it's a little bit less from.
It's
if my
close,
math
but it
is-
still means that you have to find,
Yeah.
$1,500.
Yeah,
And in the case of this year,
Right.
it sounds like you actually ended up having to find more because
I
things
did.
moved around.
So this year, our budget is going up to, so originally we were budgeted where the town had given us $201,000 plus dollars, which was fine, and then we have this beautiful thing where people are getting increases. So, but for us, that raises us to $210,000, which made my new book budget go up to $39,986. So, I think Scott probably thought she wants to shoot herself in the foot and not get an increase, because there's like, how am I gonna
well, this
find
looks like
$2,000?
about 18%. So to Becky's point, it looks like about 18% the way I'm calculating
Yeah.
here. So, I mean, we definitely want to be sure that we're helping you get to what you need to do for state requirements, obviously.
Yeah.
Tying in with that, I know you've mentioned a couple of grants in the past. Could you just tell us a little bit, since I'm on the grant committee,
Sure.
just tell us a little bit about what you've been doing with grants? And I know the Green Communities grant helped cover the lighting finally, but then you had already gotten a
I'd already
separate
gotten,
grant,
yeah,
right?
I'd already gotten.
And can you still use that for something?
So I have leftover money within that grant, and
Okay.
yes, I can.
Okay.
That's actually, so that grant, the $3,000, is still, I think it's 3,000, but it's still in the bank here. The second $10,000 we haven't started to use yet, except for, we're going to be doing the sensory garden. That was another $10,000 grant. Then this year, there was a Mass DEP grant for about $1,500, but that one is a reimbursement thing. So they're actually cutting off that for that Mass DEP. We have to actually submit the bills. So,
So you have about 13,000 in grant money available right now
Right
to do
now.
some of your programs,
right.
special things.
Right. And that part, but with 10,000 of it is supposed to be earmarked, and that will be gobbled. The community garden will gobble that up, definitely. So those are the 3 grants over the last couple of years.
And are there some that you would have liked to apply for, but you haven't been able to? That were qualified to apply for, or are they?
Well, because.
How often do they come up?
Those ALA grants, we got 2 in a row, so I don't know how, I can keep on applying to those.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
I'm trying to think of other sort of grants like T-Mobile or Walmart or any of these other industries.
But all of that would be just for special programs. It's not part of your core expenses, really.
Exactly.
It's to do other things you'd
It's
like
to
to
do other things, exactly. And one thing I want to just add about the state grant, so when we get that money, that cannot go towards salaries. That has to be earmarked for other expenses.
Okay, good point.
Just as an FYI.
Okay. Anybody else have other comments, questions? Thoughts?
I didn't realize that you guys actually had my budget narrative.
Of course we do.
I didn't realize that. There is one thing that I did do a capital request, so I didn't use all of my capital requests. That's also outstanding that I got from last year when they helped us to step up the conference room. I did put in another capital request to replace our boiler room door and casing, which is currently separating from its hinges. It's not crazy, but it's something sort of to be concerned about. So that's one capital request that we have outstanding for this year.
and money left over from capital that wasn't needed comes back in, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So we'd have to do a town meeting vote to rescind whatever was approved.
Oh, really?
That's not been used for
Right.
that purpose. Because town meeting voted for purpose X, this amount of money.
Right.
If you were economical and did better than what you thought, and then you have a couple thousand left over, then we would have to do a vote, I think, at town meeting to pull that back
To
into
pull
the
it
capital
back
fund.
in.
Yeah.
So, but when you see it, it's sitting there and that will be up to you then.
Yeah, that'll be a Bradley and Scott activity probably. Okay, good. Anybody else have any comments or questions? All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you. I had one more slide, a
Oh.
snapshot of 3 years of COVID recovery.
I'm sure it's up here somewhere.
I was like, what about my snapshot? And I don't know if that's gonna, it's okay. if
Yeah, it's
it
there.
doesn't.
There you go.
So anyway, it's about our COVID recovery. I just wanted to express my gratitude because I really do think that without support, we wouldn't have been able to get here. I still will do curbside pickup for people. A snapshot of circulations from, you see how many library cards that we made with the library card initiative in the census. If we can scroll down a little bit, Scott, for the circulations again, for the recent circulations just over the end of last year. That was, I think, sort of interesting, like how we've been fulfilling loans, getting loans in from other libraries and working hard. And I couldn't do it without you, and certainly not without my staff, but without all of your support, and I want to thank you ahead of time. So, any questions, please feel free to email me.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Next up, I think we have Dylan and Park Commission. Right.
I'm Dylan Maudsley, I'm Chair of the Parks Commission. Please, when Scott brings this up, my budget's a lot simpler.
So one of the things I just want to point out with the parks, I know Dylan had talked to me about some additional funds for like AED and other improvements, and that kind of took Bradley and I down a rabbit hole, so I got to ask you a few questions.
Sure.
Right after this. So there might be some possible money in some revolving accounts that we're looking for. I just wanted to bring that up. As well as this year where we moved the waste removal into the townwide waste budget, so you don't have to pay for that anymore.
Great.
And then I know I just want to mention the AED purchases. But one thing is, I don't know if you've ever seen these this here, but you have 13,000 in the field usage
Yes.
fees? Okay.
I can cover that. I can go over all those.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Do we have a narrative on this one, or no?
Should.
Maybe I forgot it?
Okay, I don't have
I'm
it in
sorry
the
if I
packet.
did.
I have a copy with me if you want to.
No. You can speak to it, that's okay.
Photocopy.
We'll get a copy then.
Yeah. So do you want to start with those few issues first, Scott, or do you want to do the budget and then go back to those issues?
Go back to those.
Sure. So the Parks Department, the Parks Commission is obviously the overseer, the operations and maintenance of the three public parks, Coleman Park, LaBrie Field, and Crossroads Park. We set policies and procedures for park usage, approve the field use application, collect fees, rent the pavilion, and fund necessary maintenance and capital projects, or oversee those if they're being usually used as either CPA money or grant money for the major improvements. The mission of the commission is to ensure that the residents of Southampton have a well-maintained, safe, and appropriate open park space for recreation, relaxation, play, as well as casual and organized sports. The big trend we've seen over the last few years as the town is growing is the usage of the parks. We've got some incredible new capital assets that have come in service in the last few years, the pickleball courts, which get an incredible amount of usage. The tennis courts and basketball courts have been recently resurfaced. Those are seeing increased usage because of that. And then the donation of Maddie's Magical Playground over at Labrie Field has also seen additional use, and just for the park usage overall, where, my impression of park usages 5+ years ago was primarily for passive walking and sports teams, organized youth sports. The overall user base has grown, that we've got a lot more organized pickleball, tennis, as well as just pick-up play usage in those parks. With the playground, we're seeing a lot of families traveling to the park specifically to use those play structures. As well as, in the winter we see cross-country skiers out there, which is awesome to see too. So the parks are getting year-round.
Ice skating too at Labrie Field?
There was, we haven't done it in a while. It's kind of when
Looked like there was a little pond forming there.
Yeah, when it forms, it freezes over. Randall does a great job. He mows down all that long grass in that drainage culvert, and it just naturally fills with water once it freezes, and it gets used for skating, which I'd love to see even bigger, but I think that's kind of what, when it naturally fills in, it does become a usable space for that as well.
Somebody has a full-size rink across the street.
They do.
Yes.
I don't know if they use that or not, but.
Should approach them and say, hey, can we annex that into the park, and we can
Really?
make a good use of it. Unlike a lot of other departments, we are primarily self-funded from the usage of user fees from the local youth sports organizations, SYA primarily. We were getting some usage of the Labrie Field large diamond. That has since dried up. I think some of that was we readjusted our fees about 2 years ago, and with the increase in fees, we are now on that field specifically over the pricing for a lot of surrounding towns, and the quality of that field is not up to par with what the surrounding towns are offering for a field of that size. It's a very large diamond. It's a full-size adult diamond. So we don't even have any local teams that use it, any Southampton-based or even Hampshire regional-based teams that use that field. So I think there's an ongoing discussion of what do we want to do with that in the long term. This past year, part of the reason we did not get usage this year was we received feedback, we'll say, from some of the leagues that were using it, that the mound wasn't in sufficiently good condition, that the clay wasn't in sufficiently good condition, but we were collecting less than $500 a year in usage fees from that, and to purchase the material alone to improve the condition of that field to their standards would have exceeded probably our yearly income from
And
it.
how would you have charged for that? Is it like per season or per game?
Per game, so it's $100 per game, which is, surrounding towns are charging anywhere from $50 in the larger communities where I think their fields are more heavily subsidized, to right around $100. So we're on the upper end, but at the upper end, those fields are in substantially better condition. The town comes in and lines the fields before the games, and they have lights available. And it's just things that I don't think as a town since we have no use for it, what I'm saying, we're not serving our residents with it, that all these leagues are coming in from surrounding areas. I mean, not even neighboring towns. Most of them are coming in from further away. Some are coming from Connecticut to use it because it was a halfway point for people coming down from Franklin County, so they were meeting here. But since it really wasn't serving the town, I didn't view it as something that we wanted to invest our limited resources in to bring to that level, because the level of draw that we were getting to it was low. We also in the past have had some negative interactions with user groups on that field. None of the ones that have been there in the last couple of years, everyone I've dealt with recently has been fantastic to deal with, but there has been that experience because it's primarily adult baseball, competitive baseball. And there's been conflicts with them and I hate to say it, but kids in town and parents in town when arriving for youth sports events. So there has not been much of an appetite to further expand that. There just wasn't a good cost-benefit analysis on that. I think there's thoughts of potentially looking at readjusting that field to change it into a field that would be usable for youth baseball in town. But that's, I think, a bigger conversation that we need to have with SYAA and with the town in general, because there's naming rights to it. I don't want to, it's not a decision I want to make hastily. I think it's something that needs to be well considered, well thought out, and kind of make sure there's support for making such a major change, because I know that field was that park was well thought out and well planned, and I don't want to come in and try to undo the work of a previous commission, just because I think it's the right thing to do. So it's something that we're looking at. I think that with the non-usage of it this year, I think that's something we need to look at sooner than later.
So the soccer fields are all getting quite well used, so, right? All surrounding the baseball field.
They are very, very, very heavily used every year. There's always a long discussion about who's going to be where, when, and how do we line these, and how do we get user groups to use them. The fields are almost overutilized, which I'll get to the budget in a second.
Yeah.
But I think as a preface to that, part of the problem we're running into is the quality of grass on the fields is declining. And there's three major factors to that. Number one, if you don't water it, it's not going to grow. Number two, is fertilizers. We need to be able to apply fertilizers as well as aerating and overseeding that annually, which is an expensive proposition. And three, fields need to be given rest. So in an ideal world, we would have probably 2 more fields than we need, and then you can rotate them off. So every year, one field has a chance to be basically unplayed, allowed to regrow, so you get that good perennial growth, get good root structure, and then you can rotate those usable fields so that the fields that we do have remain in excellent condition. I mean, regardless, there's going to be wear to them. I mean, that's just the way it is. But that's kind of the struggle that we're dealing with now. We did this past year do 2 fertilizer applications, and overall the playing conditions improved dramatically. We just got lucky this past year with the rain, and that there was regular rain throughout the summer that allowed those fertilizer applications to work well. Which brings us to the budget. So sure.
Point of interest, when you say field, how big, and you need 2 more fields to accomplish your rest objective, how big is the field?
They vary in size. Realistically, I think you'd be looking about 2 acres per field.
Plus parking.
Plus parking. Well, I mean, what do you say? So at Labrie, if you had the space, you would need an additional parking because you could just move you would basically leave one field unlined, unmarked, and then you'd mark everything else. And the next year, you take another field, you put it where the unmarked field was, and you kind of do that.
Fair point.
If there's additional space added elsewhere, then yeah, you'd have to accommodate for that. I think, but yeah, I think we're looking. It depends, because the fields are anywhere from, I think the smallest fields are the kindergarten fields, and those are something like 15 by 30 feet, and then the largest fields are very large. I don't know the exact dimensions on it, but like I said, by the time you get done with...
But you need 2 more fields, or 2 more fields worth of
we would
area
probably
in order to rest.
Potentially more than that, because as is, we are... This is from soccer at least, is telling me that they have to figure out which fields they're going to line based upon what the interest is. And they've been, I don't say lucky, but it's worked out that they haven't had teams in every single category for the older kids, because that's where the largest fields come in. As the teams get bigger, the fields get bigger. So if they need to align 2 of 11v11 fields, they're out of luck, because they don't have room for 2 11v11 fields. So it's always been, when we've needed an extra 9v9 field, they haven't needed the 11v11, so they've been able to line it. But if there ever came a year where they had to field all those teams, there'd be we'd probably be double lining fields with 2 different colors, so that just for spacing is what it comes down to. So,
I have a question.
Sure.
So you mentioned water being a really important factor for good grass, we know that. Unfortunately, we did get some rain this year, but aren't there sprinkler systems on those fields?
Yeah.
And I did hear a previous presentation about it costs a lot of money to use town water to sprinkle on it. Is there still a sprinkler system there?
There is a sprinkler system there. It needs pretty substantial renovations at this point. Unfortunately, after it was installed, the ground didn't settle completely, and so sprinkler heads were beginning to pop up into playing surfaces. And I think, yes, so, and in the middle of games or during practices, if a coach or a referee found one, there was no time, of course, to dig it out, reset it properly and do it, so they would unscrew the head and they'd throw it off to the side of the field. So we have a box of sprinkler heads, and we would need to go through and figure out where those go, reset those heads in. Realistically, that's something that, again, we're looking at, of what level does this need? I don't want to turn it on until we are ready to undertake a project on it, because once we turn it on, then we have to be able to winterize it, and that is an expense. So there's a process to powering the sprinklers, and we do want to do that. We're probably thinking, hopefully this year we're going to do that, if we can figure out the budgeting for that. The issue is, even if we were to get it up and running, I'm estimating it's going to be between $7,000 and $10,000 per year to run the sprinklers on that field. Roughly. The other direction we're looking at, and we've reached out for some rough, we haven't asked for quotes for a bit, but just rough estimates from a well company to come in and install a well system that could run the sprinklers and also provide water to the field house, which is in the next planning phase of LaBrie Field that has not been completed. There is CPA money that's been approved for that we would probably either come back for more or find a separate funding source. But if we were to do the well, that would potentially decrease the cost of building it, because we wouldn't need to draw into the city. We wouldn't need to do all the work to pull off the city water. We could do it off the well, and then our overall operating costs of using that would also go down, because we wouldn't be paying for town water for any of it. It would be coming out of the well. That's right over the Barnes Aquifer, so I don't see a reason why we couldn't. But that's, I'm guessing the rough estimates from what I've heard so far, you're looking $50,000 to $60,000 for a well that would be capable of powering that large of a sprinkler system. Is what it comes down to. Is basically it's the size of the well and the size of the pump that would need to pull to be able to run that many zones. We've gone back and said, well, is there a way to do like a charging tank? Is there a way to rezone the thing so that we could do a smaller well and spread the amount of time out that it takes to water? So those numbers are kind of up in the air. But that's something that we're considering as a one-time capital investment rather than necessarily having an ongoing budget line for water. Because if we were to pay $7,000 to $10,000 a year for water, that alone would wipe out all of the user's fees, and then some. We'd be in the negative.
Yeah, for sure.
Trying to run that.
And you still do have CPA money that's been allocated though, right?
Yes.
For both water and the field house, or just?
I don't know about the water. I have to look at that. I don't know the answer to that.
And are you thinking about doing any kind of like a feasibility study about this idea of the well and the sprinklers, or has that been,
So the sprinkler system is installed and is in the design and the master plan for LaBrie Field already.
Yeah.
The well, I think we're just trying to get a ballpark number on what it would actually be, and then if we need to do a feasibility, ask for money from there. Right now, we haven't spent any money, and we wouldn't ask to spend money until we're ready, we want to go in that direction. But if it came down to, if a well company said, just from looking at it, said, nah, it's not going to work, or it's going to be incredibly cost prohibitive to do this, then we would, I don't see a point of spending money to throw bad money, good money after bad. So that's my thought on it. And if that is something we want to do, absolutely, we would consider doing a feasibility study on that, of whether or not that would be done.
Yes. Go ahead, back to your.
Thank you. So the preface about all the usage is kind of why I'm asking for more money. I understand that is a very large increase. Removing the trash from our usage is going to be huge. I mean, that's $4,000 a year already. That's going to come off of our overhead, which is a very large portion of our just ongoing operating expenses for the parks. The Conan Park pavilions are basically revenue neutral. Every dollar that we take in goes back out to pay for cleaning, maintenance, electricity. The CalPAL credits come out of there. So it's in the negative, but I think when you get done with the receipts catching up with the expenses, it's right around revenue neutral. So at that point, the only source of income that we have left is the field usage fees, which primarily come from the parents of youth sports in town. And right now, that's paying for everything else that we do in the parks. So some of the things I would like to see potentially moved into the general fund for our usage is the porta potties. Basically, is one of the big ones. We've had one put into Conan Park on the library side this year, partially at the request of pickleballers, partially at the request of the library, because there was a lot of usage of the library, which is affecting their budget because of consumption. So we brought that in this year, and that's got quite regular usage. LaBrie Field with the Maddie's Playground there, again, is getting more usage. So we feel it's one of these things where these are services that are providing benefit for the entire town. Sure. So shouldn't necessarily be paid off the back of just the sports users. And I'd like to see that sport usage going to paying for the fertilization program, which is right around $7,000 per year, watering the fields, field improvements, purchasing grass seed, additional, anything that we can do to improve the fields for that specific user base. Everyone benefits from it, but that at the same time, it's something that can be used for that purpose.
Are any of these things in terms of the fertilizer and the seeding and whatever else, is that all focused on Labrie, or some of that at Conant Park too for the Little League folks and all that area of the ball field?
We would absolutely expand it. Right now, we've been focusing on Labrie because the quality of the fields at Labrie is poor. The quality of the fields at Conant, because it's so wet over there, have been very good. If we were to expand into a fertilizer program and we're seeing good results from it, we would absolutely be looking at expanding it over to Conant as well, if it needed it.
But they're not needing that attention.
They're not needing it. Those fields are lush and beautiful. And I think there could be some usage for like some pre-emergent weed control, but for the most part, those fields are very thick, they're grass. And right now, I believe SYA Baseball just got a grant to rehab all those fields. So they're going to be doing some pretty major work over there to make them nicer, and hopefully we can work with them on upkeep and making sure they remain in really good condition.
Okay. Good.
Is there any expenses that you might be able to use from the trust accounts?
Potentially. So I know, I gotta look more into that. I think there's restrictions on both the Labrie Field gift account as well as the Conant Park trust account. The trust, I believe the Conant Park, we can only access interest, we cannot access principal.
Right.
And I believe that's the same with Labrie as well. We actually need, Bradley, I gotta talk to you. There was a bunch of user fees that were deposited into the Labrie Field account by previous folks, and those probably need to get moved over to the field usage account, which is a revolving account. But I don't know how that might have to be an annual town meeting transfer.
So can we explain each of these, the revolving funds and the gift funds,
Sure.
so that we understand what we're talking about here?
So the Conant Park Pavilion Fund is the account that we deposit all of the payment for the rental of Conant Park Pavilion, and then out of that account comes all the expenses related to the pavilion. The Park Commission field usage is supposed to be for the field usage fees that come in from SYAA or other user groups. It's for the usage of the playing fields.
For both fields, for both
Correct, Labrie and Conant.
And is that what you said the 7,000 fertilizing comes out of?
Correct, that's what we'd be taking out of. Out of last year, we took less. Last year, we only did about 3,000.
Yeah.
This year, we're going to look to step it up to about 7,000. We're hoping to. Park renovations, I don't know. I don't know what that account is for. And then Conant Wildlife is not under our purview, Conant Library is not, and Conant Park is again the gift account when the park was established. And my understanding is that gift account, again, is limited to expending of interest only and not principal.
That might be the interest available.
Oh.
Yeah, so we met with Bartholomew today, and this is still very preliminary. So very early, we gotta do a lot of work.
Our investment fuel?
But they had your beginning principal at $54,000 and your beginning earnings as expendable as $36,184.
Okay. So that would make a huge, there's definitely some improvements in Conant Park we can use that for,
Yeah.
100%.
So you said the library and the wildlife funds are not ones that you manage, or?
If they are, it's news to me. But, it's possible. I don't know, I'd have to do some more research into that.
Yeah,
Sorry, I don't have a better answer for you right now.
yeah. I'm wondering if the wildlife one would have been around the same time of the gift to the park, from the Conants. I wonder if that kind of went together.
When
Interesting.
was the last time you applied for and received a park grant?
It was 2 years ago when we purchased with that the sprinkler equipment for the spray deck, as well as did the feasibility study and the designing of the walking path. At that time, we were told politely, don't come back and ask for another one until you get a master plan done. Master plan's done, so we need to go and look at reapplying for a new park grant to complete that spray deck project. It's going to be about $100,000. We'll need $120,000.
And the location visit Conan Park.
Correct.
Yep.
That's
G-
interesting.
GZA had already done the design on that. and
Yep,
everything.
everything's good to go. It's
Yeah.
it's literally just finding
Yeah.
funding at this point. But it's good to know about that. I didn't realize that was the expendable interest because there's been some requests for some
We did find funding.
improvements to park.
Okay, so, yeah, go ahead.
I had a question that's not right out of my mouth yet, if you remember what it was. Sorry, I can't remember.
While you're
Yes,
thinking,
you-
so back on the pavilion, so did you say that was revenue neutral, so that what you're charging for the pavilion, it basically is covering your electricity costs, or not?
Well, we're at a flat rate with Eversource there. It's a non-metered account, so it's $30 a month regardless. So it's not, there's stuff in there that has been part of larger town projects, like the cow pal credits, those come directly out of that account.
Yeah.
I don't know, that's just the way it's been done. I don't know. if
Don't
it makes
ask us
sense.
about cow credits.
What's that?
Don't ask us about that yet. We're still
Yeah, no, I
obtaining that
understand.
one
There's a whole,
too.
there's another energy credit that's coming out of there. There's just kind of
Yeah.
the ongoing park costs have been tied to that account historically. I have not made any efforts to remove them from there, mainly because I'm not an accountant and I still am learning the financial stuff. But it's hard to say. Some years we've had, it was revenue making, some years it was revenue, we were in the negative on it. Right now, the account, as you can see, is technically in the negative.
Yeah,
But I don't know if that's the correct amount because I don't keep a separate, I don't keep a separate ledger of our deposits and our expenses out of that account. So I'm not sure if that number is representative of revenue up to date. So as you can see, revenues as of 12/15/24 and expenses are 2/11/25. I think there may have been another deposit, but there may not have been. Regardless, I think that account has been in the negative for years and years and years. But I
Are
don't.
you keeping track of payroll is that, I can't see.
here's the payroll list.
Is it payroll on that one?
So we don't, I don't know why it's considered payroll. We don't supervise, we don't control that employee. That employee is through the highway department.
Yes.
And they are just paid out of that account. So we have no control over the hours.
And they do
or
what, the
anything.
mowing and or what?
That is for the cleaning of the bathrooms
Oh.
and not the trash tippage fees, but the physical removal of the trash from the pavilion, cleaning it up, that kind of thing.
So that might be something that doesn't need to be in their account, does it?
Probably not.
Seems like it ought to be.
think so.
If you're gonna move the trash fees, why wouldn't you move the person that goes with some of that maintenance
Right.
too?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's a good conversation we haven't really.
Yeah, you thought anyway.
What account would we pay that employee out of?
Figure that out in terms of whatever maintenance.
And I would say, and to be honest, I'm asking for this, I understand percentage-wise a very large increase. I would say, the alternative, if we're looking at removing a significant number of our expenses and not changing our fee structure, then I wouldn't necessarily be looking for an increase out of, a larger increase. It would be a much more limited increase out of the general fund.
So this taking into consideration, so you've put in the request for the 7,000, not taking into consideration moving out the 4,000
Correct.
already. So maybe we don't have that big an increase then?
I mean, I would.
Probably not.
Maybe,
Maybe not.
maybe not, yeah.
My thing, if I were to say the one thing I would like to see is at least one of the portable restrooms be funded directly on the general fund, because specifically the one on that side of Conant, because there is no user group paying for it. The other two, we're in conversations about changing our field usage policy. Right now, the current policy says that user groups are to provide the porta potty for their season. The problem is it's then getting picked up and dropped off at different times of the year. Our thought was to, rather than doing that, figuring out on average what those groups are paying, removing that requirement, charging a one-time utility or a facility fee, adding that in, and then purchasing year-round the other two. That way there's continuity for those facilities. So, yeah, I think the request, given that we're taking trash out, and if we're looking at the staff salaries, we could look at a substantially smaller request for an increase.
So right now, you've got 2 porta potties at Labrie, and then there's one on Conant Field on Clark Street area by the little schoolhouse.
Correct.
And then there's the one over by the library.
Correct.
So there's 4
There's
altogether.
3, 2 is one at Labrie. We probably should
just
add a
one.
second one.
Oh, okay.
There's one at Labrie. It gets
Just 3.
heavily used.
So, as a general observation, because I kind of wander around there for the various reasons, the porta potty, especially the ones behind the old schoolhouse, is used by anyone driving by Route 10. Like ordinary work people that have to, stop for a moment, and it's well used, and sometimes needs cleaning. It's not your fault. I mean, I called the 800 number and said, it's bad shape. So it should come out of the general fund. That's my personal opinion. It's a service. It's a wonderful service, and but I don't think it should just be parks. If that could be done.
Yeah, and that's something that if they are getting heavily used and we're getting it, I can always call the company and have them do. Right now, we're paying, I think, for either weekly or bi-weekly cleanings. We can have them step it up
Well,
to.
somebody could evaluate that. I'm just for.
Yeah, no, I'm just letting you know. So that's one of those things that we can always, so that's the nice part with that, is the cost is shockingly reasonable for what they are.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And have you done any changes in the pavilion usage fees over time? The last
We
couple of years?
have, we're up to $200 for residents and $250 for non-residents, which is slightly below the overall cost of the surrounding parks, specifically Stanley Park and Nonotuck Park. However, both of those parks have newer facilities with more amenities, and we feel we have a rate that is appropriate given the size, age, and amenities that are available.
I have a couple more questions. One is, and my friend Dan over here has asked a couple of times, what's the status of looking for a dog park? Is that still out there or not? Just say not if it is.
It's not on our radar, but it's something that I think if the right opportunity would come up, we would fully support anyone who wants to help take the lead on that initiative.
And there is that property, on the right side of the driveway going from East Street, that the Wrights, who are the owners, have said they'd love to see some use for it. They still own it. The other question I have is, one of the members of your commission comes to the Open Space Committee meeting, and when we ask for reports, they're all, Paula, and she's always saying, is there any land available? But are you still looking to see acquisition of more park-related, satisfactory land?
Yes. We're, as I mentioned before, not just resting of the fields with actual field spacing. One of the things we're running into, which has been a point of some contention, has been the soccer fields that are placed in what is ultimately the outfield of the baseball diamond that is on the Clark Street side of Conan, closest to the road, kind of in the back, the non-fence baseball diamond. And those fields are used for practice at the same time baseball is practicing for fall ball. And it's amazing that we have had to remind parents that don't sit with your back to the baseball field while they're doing batting practice. But we do, and so it's kind of gotten to the point that as recreational sports are growing, I wouldn't be shocked if we saw lacrosse at some point come into Southampton. That's a sport that's growing considerably. Field hockey is continuing to grow considerably. So at some point, we have not been asked yet, but I would not be surprised if at some point we were approached by a group to say we would like to use field space to create a lacrosse team for kids of Southampton. So yeah, we're always looking for land, primarily, and part of the reason we're always looking is that, as you well know, there's not a lot of flat land in Southampton. So it's kind of when stuff becomes available that is large and flat and would allow for parking, that is something that we know we're going to grow into.
Right. Have you been asked by anybody who wants to do archery? Because I know that's quite an interesting sport that's growing in the area.
Not yet, but we would love to see more usage of all of them.
I'll add some additional funds to our insurance budget.
We just want to make sure, I happen to have 2 archers in my family, and you want to put the targets not facing the wrong direction.
Which is more than another reason why we'd like to put the soccer fields not there, so that way they're not.
There you go. Yeah. I just have one, it's more of a comment really. I'm talking to folks around, various things come across my radar. Heard a lot, especially more from seniors, about extra lighting at Conant Park.
Yeah.
That's just really a tough one, especially, if they went to a concert or had an event in the evening and it's, dark out or getting dark. Walking down from the pavilion down to the parking lot is not terribly feeling safe, I think, for a lot of people. And so I just would like to throw that out as a consideration for somehow to figure out if there were a grant available or something. And I don't know how that would tie into our current electric system that we have there, because that was another challenge, I think, with the park grant, that they wanted the electric line, if I'm not mistaken, I think they wanted it buried. And we had just put in the overhead one. So I'm not sure whatever happened there, but long story short, but just a thought for consideration. I think it's been hard. And then just and I don't know if the sound system, that's not maybe within park, that's anybody who comes for that one, right? Yeah, so that's a different one too. But especially some extra lighting, I think, would be a thought on the radar screen at some point.
Yeah, I can address that briefly. I had a conversation with a concerned citizen regarding that specific issue. And I think there's a couple competing interests there where I want to try to make everybody happy. Number one, technically the parks are closed under our current scheme at dusk. The parks are open from dawn to dusk.
Sure.
I think when you put in additional lighting, it gives the impression that the park is in fact open, which it's not. However, I do understand also the need for safety, and the summer concerts are wonderful. They're they're hugely attended. They're a beloved tradition in town. I want nothing but those to continue, to be very clear on that. But I think looking at how do we put something in there that not only says, well, we're not really open at night, and number two, light pollution and neighbors and having lights on 24/7 is a problem. So I think one thing we're looking at, and I think now that actually as soon as you mentioned this money in the Conant Park line.
You could buy a dozen tiki torches and take care of it.
Well, the little solar ones that you put along your driveway.
Those would get trashed, I think. I think more realistically what we think about doing is, because there's existing wiring in the pavilion, putting a few floodlights on the outside on a switch, so that when the concert's over, flick it on, lights up the whole parking lot in that area. Then have it be part of the user agreement that at night, when you're done, you shut those off when you leave.
Something like that.
It's a balance. I mean, it's not going to make everyone happy, but at the same time, I don't think
tiki torches.
I don't think consistent all dark lighting is also appropriate there.
Yeah, no, I get your point. Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. All right.
Just to address a lot. I'm sorry. I know I'm way over my time here.
That's okay.
Everyone wants to keep everyone in. To address the ADs quickly, I've been in touch with the Girl Scouts. They're looking for a project to do. I throw that as one potential possibility. So that might be something. If that doesn't come through, we'll be in touch. And what's the other one? Was there something else you wanted to ask about?
No, just because we're looking at the trust funds.
Yeah, and that might be another place we might draw from in order to do those too.
This would be to have a portable AED over there?
Well, there's a bunch of other parks. I don't know if I've seen one locally, but I've definitely seen them before. They're locked boxes that you mount to a building that has existing electricity, so that would be at the pavilion, at the snack shack down on the other side of Conant, and then there's an electrical panel at Labrie, that board that's kind of hanging off the parking lot, and they have a code on it. And the code's accessible when you call 911. So you call the dispatcher gives you the code and then walks you through providing the service while they send the ambulance. So it's really kind of it's a really nice system. They're well built, they're very solid, they're bright yellow, and I think it would be a really good community service to have available to residents.
Good. All right. Well, once we sort out what some of these funds can be used for, you may have a little bit more money than you think you do, or at least the interest that's accrued over time that you may not have been aware of. That, and that's been part of our challenge, I think, by having our investment account. We've only in the last couple of years had the Bartholomew people come and talk to the select board to get a general idea about where is our money anyway. And so some of these revolving funds that have been around for years and years, and just trying to figure out where they've been put and how they've grown or not grown or what we need to do with them. So, yeah, good. Well, thank you. Anybody else have questions? Sorry, chit-chatting here. No. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dylan. Appreciate it. All righty. Okay, next up, the Cemetery Commission, Mr. Floyd.
There was one amendment to the narrative that I put right there for you too.
Good evening.
Hi.
Welcome. You have a Floyd. I'm wearing a hat of the cemetery commissioner tonight. Sure I am. It's invisible. Looking at and listening to the two presenters before me, I was quite impressed. And I'm doing a 180-degree turn from what I originally was going to present to you all. Sorry, or maybe not. 80% of our budget falls into three categories. One is our trees, one is the expansion of the cemetery, and the other is the computerization of our records. We're very frugal. We ask for less money than we want, but we felt this is what we need. And historically, we've operated level funding mostly through the years, and sort of a Band-Aid approach, reaction. You know, tree would fall, there goes some money for the pins. The next year, gee, we need a surveyor, there goes some money for the pins. We'll do the pins the next year. But we've had the surveyor in, we've had the pins in. And we hired, actually we invited, it didn't cost us anything, to get Bartlett tree experts in. And tremendously well recommended by local K&J and other tree service groups. And they did an assessment of every single tree, which I didn't expect. And they did an analysis of what could be done to beautify that tree or to make it more healthy, and at a tremendous expense. We think maybe over a 5-year plan, but we could do little bits and pieces. And we decided we'd save our oaks because we had to have an oak cut down, which was live, but it was dangerously hanging over the back road, so much so that people were reluctant to drive underneath. Healthy, but it had to come down. And because it was over the stones, $3,000. I stood there for every second and filmed it. They did a tremendous job. I also negotiated for them to trim some branches on a nearby oak tree, and they did that as well. But there went money that we expected for something else. So we've asked for a little over $9,000 this year, and we'll do some of the work. We already spent $900 for the oak trees, and they went and sprayed the fungicide around the trees. I guess they get canker sores, and the tree roots, if it's super saturated with water, or if the season is dry and wet, that's what adversely affects the trees. So we want to save the oaks. They're pretty impressive and big. So we have a 5-year plan. This is a piece of that 5-year plan. The other one is the computerization of our records. They're all done by hand, hundreds of years, meticulously. We draw the plot, we put who's to the left of the plot, who's to the right, who's in front, who's in back, deed information. We have it in a big book, and the three of us have big books, and we fill them up each year periodically with new participants in the cemetery. And when anybody wants to know where somebody's buried, we have to dig the book out at night, do the research, or in the afternoon. And some people research the circus fire. Some of the inhabitants were buried in Southampton, or a family member. We feel if we computerize them, that they'll be accessible to everybody, the public, completely. And they'll be exact. We're human beings. We have redundancy. We have a big map, and the name has to be put in. You can't carry that map all around with you. I got a call once at 5 o'clock. Somebody needed me in the cemetery. They're having a cremation burial, which we allow people to do in the family instead of hiring a grave digger. And so I showed up in 5 minutes. They dug the hole in the wrong place. I had enough information to know that, but I needed Judith because I was away from the map. I didn't know I was going to have a problem. So I was able to call Judith, and again, this is 5:30. Judith came with the map, and we figured exactly where they had to be. And we do this on weekends, evenings, but we need those records computerized, and I really don't want to borrow from that account this year. We're hoping we're not going to have any disasters with trees falling down or what have you.
Do you have some estimates? You got the 6,000, and is that just a placeholder, or do you have some
It's a placeholder.
ideas of companies that actually do this?
I've seen it where it's 8,000, and I've talked to a few cemeteries, and one cemetery commission said they went to another cemetery commission, find out where they got their software from. And when they went to that software company, it was $4,000 higher. So they mentioned that cemetery commission, and it dropped 4,000. So now we know 2 cemeteries had quite the software, so maybe we can get a discount. But 6 is a good solid figure.
But you all have to be responsible for entering that information in?
I'm willing to, I have volunteered physically doing much of the work. We probably will need other volunteers to do it. But one thing I'm excel after in my photography is short-term memory of remembering data or vision. So when I'm putting down information, I know whether I did it an hour ago, 2 hours ago, and maybe where I can get it. So yeah, that has to be done manually. And there's a photographer in town who's willing to put up photos of each grave site in that software, which would be available to, again, us, the public, anybody, and 24/7.
Is there any ongoing maintenance fees like the software, like yearly
I
subscriptions?
don't know, but if it is, I think it'd be incrementally small. There certainly, as any software, would be revisions,
Right.
updates. I'm aware of that. That will be in future budget requests.
Okay. Would it be possible with the record software and the new area design, maybe shift that to the capital? Because I think those would probably qualify as
I did think of that.
capital.
We're starting to plan more now. We're starting to plan ahead, which we didn't do before. You've encouraged us to get a 3-year capital plan. So that probably would be better in the capital list.
Would that qualify under CPA as well?
I don't know. That's a good idea, though. Might be able to.
How many new burials do you have typically in a year?
12 to 20.
Okay. And I read somewhere that you charge $600.
$750.
Okay.
$300 goes for, easy for you to say, perpetual care. And many of our graves didn't have that perpetual care, the early graves, but we're still responsible for them. And the $450 goes into an account, sale of cemetery lots. And we protect those 2 accounts because we knew way back when, one day there'd be an expansion and we would need money that the town would be unable to give us. And so we don't go to those accounts. Very rarely in an emergency, we need every penny for the future.
Are you competitive with other cemeteries in terms of what you're charging? Or?
Yes, we are. We probably could raise our rates, but we did raise them from $600 several years ago to $750.
And one thing, and maybe it's just a typo in here, because that you talk about the training fee going from $600 to $750, but it talks here about the sale of the lots at $600 in our narrative that we got. The lot themselves at $600?
Oh,
split between.
That'd be my, yeah.
Okay, and then, but then you've got a training fee that has gone from
Yeah, we
600 to 750.
We want training in green burials, computerization, and operating cemeteries more efficiently.
Okay.
And they're not offered all the time. We belong to 1 or 2 cemetery associations.
But the current plots are 600, or
They're 750.
They are 750. Okay,
They're
so that's just an error.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you said half of that goes to perpetual care, or
300 goes to perpetual care, and 450 goes to sale of cemetery lot account.
In perpetual care, it's just a fund to, I mean, people expect their grave sites to be maintained the rest of,
Yes,
through perpetuity.
thank you. And it's a gray area, so if somebody, I mean, we've had situations where we'll go and dig something ourselves and put sand in, and it's our job. Maybe, there's a wavy line of responsibility, but we need the mowing. We have vegetation coming in through the north fence, mostly forsythia. We have that trimmed because it covers a lot of the stones on our north side. And we set up a new section 11, and we had trimming of that. And then we had the town pipe that drains Pomeroy Meadow and goes into the cemetery. The pipe ruptured and eroded the bank more, drastically more, especially with all the rains in the last year or two, and you've been there at least, and Chris. So we're concerned that if the pipe ruptures a little bit more underneath section 11, it's going to cave in. And we know the town, when they do decide to come and repair it, they're going to need to set up camp, set up their machinery in order to repair that. So we removed the grave. It was between $800 and $1,200. I was there through the whole process, long process. We checked with the family, everything was okay. But we were afraid that machinery would have to be parked over that grave. That section 11 was going to give us a good 2 years, we felt. So we lost that buffer, just like that. And we feel it would be irresponsible to have graves there because we don't know what erosion is underneath. I've gone down in four seasons, carefully, very slippery in the winter. And I could see water coming under the pipe as well as the pipe itself. So I believe the fracture is upstream more. And that forces us into expanding the cemetery. We have a section in the southwest corner, roughly an acre. We brought in a surveyor, ready to pay the surveyor, and the surveyor says, you know, you'd be better off hiring someone to come in, cut the dead trees down, cut the brush, cut the saplings, to get a good look at the contour of the land. And we did, and that was $3,000. And it's done. In the spring, we want to get an architectural firm in to take a look. Our idea is to have the hearse back up off High Street through a locked gate. The gate, the hearse backs up, unloads, and there would be there'd be an oval, a walkway through that section of the cemetery where the hearse would come here off of High Street. So people could walk around and visit the various grave sites. No cars allowed, wheelchair accessible. That's our dream. And we're learning about green burials. We talked with the health department, they have to be involved. Do we want it for that section? I don't know. We'd have to vote on it, we have to educate the town, we have to get more educated ourselves. It's a process, very interesting. Originally, we wanted the 80 acres or so for the Enid Johnson, that section of land that was acquired for the Water Department, Cemetery Commission, and missing one, help.
Conservation.
Conservation, thank you. I was part of the Concom, I should know that. And the three commissions would fought for that property, and it was acquired. And we knew we would expand the cemetery. We knew there was a stream there. There was talks of building a bridge, which would be too prohibitive. So we thought we'd have a trail coming from the northwestern section behind the balloon place, the bouncy
Bounce house.
business. Have a pathway going through the property where there would be a bench and maybe 2 or 3 graves. Some green, some not. Another pathway going, because we want people to walk the cemetery. We want people to walk the land. We want to treat it as a park, more as a park. And we felt that pathway, we'd have 3 here, 5 there, and not clear cutting as a standard cemetery would be. And we studied that. We had a consulting company come in, gave us a plan, everything worked, we're ready for it. We voted on it, we appropriated funds, we got the wetland scientists to come in. I walked with the wetland scientist, I know hydric soils. He kept showing me his auger, gray, gray, gray. Every square inch of that corner where we envision a walkway is hydric soil, wetlands. No pathway, no bridge certainly.
So there's no way to get to that 80 acres that we've actually
It's
purchased?
the only way to get to those 80 acres from the cemetery as it exists, the center cemetery.
The edge is the wettest portion.
Right.
And I will try over, he didn't even charge us, because he said there was nothing to flag, everything was wet, unbelievable. And this was up slope from the stream. We can drive out College Drive, Highway Pomeroy, Walcott, and go up and take a look from the other end of that property. I've talked to Kester about it. It's possible, we're waiting for the spring to do it. It's a schlep for somebody wanting to visit somebody in the grave at the center cemetery and then getting in their car and meandering through. We did, because of that, vote to approach the town, and we asked the town for 2 acres of the new College Highway property, and that's a dream. We need to be realistic and not realize that dream may not come tomorrow. So this is why we're pursuing the area of the southwest corner of the cemetery.
Just one quickie question on the computerization. Is that going to be for both Center Cemetery and West Park?
Yes.
Both?
Yes. We don't have great records for the West
Yeah, I
Park.
was going to say.
And some of the graves move. We either have one existing deed for the West Park Cemetery. I've approached the people and told them they can't have any machinery. Everything has to be hand carried. They've agreed to that. We've agreed to give them a plot in the center cemetery. They don't want it. So they're legally allowed to be buried there.
Oh, well, okay. Interesting. One last question. We don't have any particular space in our cemetery like Easthampton does for cremains, right? There's no
One of the things,
designated
and I left
section.
it out, one of the aspects we're looking at is a cremation wall for cremated remains.
Okay.
This is something we realize is important, and that would be part of the design or request for that new property.
So why don't you talk to us about these accounts here, maybe? What do we know?
Well, the first one is from the money that we received from the burial plots.
Can you make that a little bit bigger?
Yeah, sorry.
Just a little- There we go.
Oh, thank you.
The middle two are from stone restoration for the two. And then the last one, this is actually, looking at the Bartholomew report, expendable interest. So not principal, but the interest
Right.
from the game.
Yeah.
So.
The one about the graves, the gravestones, we used to sell the hydrangeas. We would have a florist come in and maybe get $400, $500, and we would put in that little small account. So when we wanted to clean a stone professionally, it cost about $1,000. So if we want to clean 3 stones, it's $3,000. But we learned to clean them ourselves. A very expensive liquid, which we spent some of our budget for last year, FY25. It's called D2. And you apply it on the stone, you don't touch it, you don't rub it, you don't scour it, and then you rinse it off, and the stone is shiny white. It's amazing. And we use volunteers from the church across the street. We can celebrate Southampton a couple of years ago. They did a great job.
So you have possibly $42,000 available to be tapped into? What is that last account, Scott? What does it come from?
129 is what?
What's it come from? Perpetual care. So out of the perpetual care, do you contribute, how does the,
Of the perpetual care, we contribute 300 of the 750.
but how much do we, sorry, does the cemetery contract with the town for lawn mowing at the cemetery, or is that a separate?
The town does the lawn mowing. We used to do it. It
Okay.
vacillated back and forth.
Okay.
And then we made a case, it's your property, it's your land, grass is growing from your land.
Yeah.
You need to take care of your land.
So the perpetual care money doesn't go toward lawn mowing, for
No.
example? Okay. So what, could you possibly take 6,000 out of that or something?
We haven't discussed it as a commission. This is one of the funds that we know we're going to tap into big time when we expand the cemetery.
So following up on Chris's question, just in general, you know, the presentation doesn't talk about the fact that they have some money socked away, but it's helpful to know. So I commend Scott for posting that, but the 67,000, that's money that we have, that we've accumulated over the years that could be used for expenses as well, isn't it? I mean, is that $100,000 up there that's available?
Where?
$110,000?
The 66,000 in sale of cemetery lots by the looks. I mean, and granted, I mean, you know, you want to keep on building it, so that's why it's invested, right? In Bartholomew, I don't know what interest it's earning, but it's accumulated over time. But I mean, when you've got a special project, it seems like that would be the ideal time to try and tap into a little bit of
The
that.
special project that we always had our eyes on is expansion.
But am I reading that right? Is that over $100,000? It's kind of pegged to the cemetery?
What is F column? Can you go to the header on that? Balance.
It sounds like a cash balance.
Which ones were you talking about, Scott? You said
The last four.
These two right here.
The sale of the cemetery lots are 66,000 balance, and then perpetual care at 42,000. There you go. Good job.
But, I mean, it brings up a bigger question. I mean, is it appropriate within these separate groupings to have them have an account with significant funds in there and then come to the select board every year for an ongoing expenditure and never touch this money? It doesn't seem like that's the most efficient way to.
Well, I think a lot of
do
these,
this.
we thought, well, at some point, many of the groups, I think, haven't really had much knowledge of or access to
Yeah,
this whole
I mean,
Bartholomew
that's-
investment thing.
yeah.
So many of them, I think, with many of the commissions, committees, whomever, that have gotten gift funds or whatever else, or somebody has passed away and, you know, given something through their will or whatever, most of it has been, well, probably true, but at least assumed that you could only spend the interest and you wanted to keep the principal growing, right? So that's why people, I think, like in parks, for example, they haven't ended up spending a lot because they know they can dip into the interest, but they haven't really had their hands on the bigger pot. And I think
This doesn't
we're
really
just kind of
sound-
finding this out
Yeah.
more clearly. Yeah.
This doesn't, especially the first one doesn't sound like it's an endowment. It just sounds like it's revenue that's been accumulated that hasn't been spent.
Historically, do you know what those have been spent on?
Very little has come from there in an absolute emergency where take care of a tree where a tree has fallen. We need to remove the tree. But we don't even discuss that. We've had more discussion here tonight than we do in a meeting about those accounts.
Were you aware of these accounts?
Yeah, yes.
So you're.
We know,
You see,
yeah.
okay.
In fact, a couple of years ago, they sort of disappeared. They didn't exist, and then we were knocking on the door. Where were they? And we do know they exist, but again, we know we're going to need the money for expansion. We know the town's not going to be there giving us all the funds we're going to need.
Sure.
So to be responsible, we leave these alone. But if a tree fell tomorrow and we had nothing in our general funds, maybe we'd vote to take that money out.
How much do you think the cemetery expansion would cost?
We don't know.
And with that, Robert, you're talking about that southwest corner off of
Yes.
that's what you're talking about right now because you can't access
Correct.
Enid Johnson's place yet.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the immediate expansion there.
That is, yes. And we have the land that's available to us.
Right.
And it's beautiful. And it's a great vision to have that wheelchair accessible and have that oval and no cars inside, no vehicles.
And it'll be good to get that fence straightened
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, we didn't really expect the landscaping company to take it all down. We thought they'd take a section.
I had a concerned citizen
Yeah.
express dismay about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe it's, nothing we can really
So
solve.
fence
tonight,
renovation
but-
from the summer?
No,
Oh,
that's
okay.
lovely.
Oh, okay.
When they cleared or did the preliminary clearing of the southwest corner for expansion, the chain link fence along the roadway along
Oh,
the
okay.
got pretty banged up.
So the cemetery commission is looking for $23,800 for the items noted. Yeah, I'm listening to what Reggie's pointing out, the balances. Granted, you need to have some money held up for whatever you need for expansion, but some of this could have come up.
Because that expansion could come next year. We get the architect in, they go, okay, we can do it. How much is it gonna cost? We've already been here. We can't come to the town and
Well, you
fiscal
don't spend it
year.
all then, but some of this could be covered under some of those accounts perhaps.
I mean, I do think that the software and the new area design, that should definitely come under capital, just because,
Okay.
like
Yeah.
with the parks, it's a town asset, and we have to preserve it and
Yeah.
continue with it.
Yeah, I would think the record software would be under a capital cost. I would think that's where that fits better.
It's relatively small.
Yeah. But it meets the threshold, it's at least $5,000.
I think the way Robert's kind of managing his fund is that he might never get any money from the town again. But there has to be some kind of assumption that the town is going to support the cemeteries.
Yeah.
In perpetuity. So
Well,
he doesn't really
capital
need,
approval.
he doesn't really need to do that. I mean, he doesn't need to sit on the $100,000. The town's going to look at it every year. He needs to look for unforeseen things for the next 12 months, not the next 200 years.
Perpetual care, the annual interest might match up against some of those ordinary things like pruning and water. That seems to be
And
part of.
Speaking of water, we were so involved in the three big factions of this, but we didn't account for the water and for the trash pickup. So we're responsible for them, we pay them, but we'll have to borrow from Peter to pay Paul. We didn't include it this year.
Is trash pickup also going to be
Should be.
centralized, so
Yeah,
we pay
yes.
the cost of the cemetery?
I asked Randall for everything,
Yeah.
all facilities,
trash.
parks, cemetery,
So you wouldn't have to take
library,
that.
all that stuff, yeah.
And we were distracted too with the fence and the water piping, and
Yeah.
we got those projects under our belt now.
Okay. But last year's budget was 13.6, and so you're looking at about a $10,000 increase. I mean, if we could, I don't know.
If you could move the
think about
top to
ca-
the capital, I think that
Yeah,
would
think about the
reduce it a
software on
lot.
capital, then that would make this a little bit more
Totally.
palatable, maybe. I mean, just because there is that balance, but I think
Yeah.
it's good to know that those funds exist, and I appreciate you wanting to preserve them, but at the same time, I think we have to figure out, I mean, these are two very special requests that I think you have. They're obvious needs in terms of the planning for the new area, as well as, computerizing all the records for God knows how many years. So I would think that would be a valid thing to do from capital very easily, but feels like we need to also be dipping a little bit into some of those funds and not coming back for new funds when we've got some sitting in the bank already. But maybe we can figure out the right formula to do that. So.
Do you ever have, are you aware of graves that have been purchased that are now not ever been used?
We
Family
may have
plots,
a- we
they
may-
bought
We may have a
6.
few,
Do they ever come up for sale?
I want to say no, I'm hesitating, maybe there might have been an exception to it, but I don't know the exact answer to that question.
Yeah.
But generally, there are graves where somebody has purchased and hasn't fulfilled them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could.
But there'd be a few, there wouldn't be
A lot of
many.
them, sure.
And then there too, we think way back when, what happened if someone didn't keep good records before us?
That's right.
So we have prods that we prod the earth and, whoops, is that a root?
It's a skull.
It's looking, okay, let's not go here.
Yeah, okay. Good. Any other questions, comments from anybody?
I think the fence looks really great from the summer, so, great
Sorry?
job on that. The fence
fence.
restoration?
Yeah.
Oh,
I
yeah.
got a lot of positive comments
Yeah.
from that,
Oh,
so really
good.
great
Yeah.
job on that, yeah.
Oh, good, yeah, it's a big beautification project and
Mhm.
great asset to the town, people driving by and
Yeah.
taking a look at it.
Mhm.
I tell people, they coming to cemetery for the first time, never use their GPS. Because it'll announce when they get there, you have reached your final destination.
I've never heard a complaint from one of your tenants, so.
No, they're pretty good.
Lapsing into our...
Thank you. I love this process.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank
Appreciate it.
you.
All right, very good. Very informative. But good information on our end here that we're finding from the Bartholomew report, so I'm thinking that's, somehow we need to make that all much more visible to all the people, all the different committees and commissions that have got some money from gift funds or revolving funds, whatever it may be, that they understand where
It
some of that
literally
is.
came up just hours ago.
Yeah, I did.
So it wasn't like I was trying to
Great.
ambush anyone, but
Yeah.
like literally just came up earlier this morning, so.
Good, no, that would be great. All right, next up, we have town accountant, Bradley?
We can probably,
Or
the other.
we're going to
yeah.
Source, okay.
Yeah.
Want to go to assessors, since we have some assessors
good.
here? All right, go there,
Can
next.
I call the meeting of the assessors to order you can take minutes too, Linda, at 7:45, because we do have 100% of our board here. And I'm going to introduce them quickly: Linda Green and Kimberly Kupast, and I'm Cindy Palmer and chairperson. And for people watching, there will be an opening on the Board of Assessors, so please remember that for people who are interested in volunteering in our town for the next election. I do think we are first of all, our principal assessor could not be here today. And so we're doing our best to provide what kind of information we can regarding our budget request. Here it is. Basically, the Board of Assessors oversees the process of assessment of properties, real and personal property in our town. It's a very important thing. We want to make sure we capture the right properties and that we capture them correctly. And to do so, we need a professional principal assessor, and we also have an assistant, administrative assistant in our office. We are a volunteer board, and none of us came with any of the backgrounds that's required of an assessor, so we have to take a course through DLS to understand the basic concept of what is required under assessment. We provide the information to the treasurer or the tax collector in order to send out the right tax bills January 1st of each year. And then there's a process for people that want to request an exemption or want to request some kind of second look at what comes in their tax bill. There is also excise tax on motor vehicles and boats, and also senior exemptions. There's also veterans exemptions. There's also disability exemptions. There's a lot of processes involved in this. Towards that goal, we also need to run an office, and in the office, there's things that we need to be considering. This year, I would say, we've had a great deal of attention put on the personnel responsibilities of this office. We, at some point in the last calendar year, we moved from having our interim principal assessor made into a permanent position, and he is now our regular principal assessor. As far as I'm concerned, he's doing a very good job, and I'm appreciative of the whole process of looking at the fact that our salaries have been studied throughout the whole town and there's transparency and equality and looking at what the responsibilities of all the town positions. And towards that end, we discovered that we should be paying our principal assessor and our administrative assistant more. So consequently, the greatest increase in our budget really is, as Johanna pointed out for the library, is related to an increase in the salaries. So that if you go to the personnel aspect of this, is it up there right now? I was looking at this part. You can see that we're raising the principal assessor's hourly rate up to $35.93 per hour for fiscal year '26, and that was an increase from $31.43. And our administrative assistant is also increased from $19.32 an hour to $22.55.
And just to clarify, that's based on the new compensation plan and schedules
right.
that we've all worked through. It's not an arbitrary figure. It's something that's come out through the whole
Thank you for
whole process.
rephrasing that, because that's what I was trying to say. It was,
Yes.
looking all the way across and comparing with other local communities, et cetera. So that's the biggest increase. We are asking for a slight increase in the number of hours in our principal assessor's hours. And where is that exactly?
What is he at now?
I think it was 26 to 30,
Yes, that's right, from 26 to 30.
and the administrative assistant stays the same, right?
And
at
the
24?
administrative assistant right now is the same, yes. We are also taking advantage of the senior tax write-off program, and we have a volunteer senior in the office who's exceptionally competent and had done the work in the assessor's office in previous years. So that's been really, really beneficial. So there isn't a whole lot more to say, but I am going to ask if there's anybody else on the board that wishes to add anything to why we're doing what we're doing, we're increasing the hours of the principal assessor, and anything else that you think is critical to add to the whole budget discussion. We do want to allow for the things that have been part of our budget going right along. We pay dues. I can't remember what we pay dues to. The Mass Association of Assessors, MA. Yeah. And also there's, of course, office supplies. We do have a contract with Vision Software. This is a specific kind of software for the entry of data and for the, the production of the property cards, etc. We do have to purchase town maps. That's through Tie and Bond. Thank you very much. And we use consultants. We've on a limited basis. They've done the commercial and industrial evaluations, valuing. They go out, do the actual. They go right to the properties and do measurements, etc. And then we do have requirements for cyclical evaluations. And this year, it's based on geography within town.
So the cyclical is a 10-year one? I thought they were like 3 years.
I think it's 10.
It's 10.
Yeah. Required.
And that's due up this year. So you didn't have it last year. It's due this year.
We did a cyclical last year in a different area of town. This is.
It's like quarters. I think Dave explained it like every quarter, like a quarter of the town they'd have to like rotate, something like that.
Yeah. So I think that's pretty much the overview, unless you two, either of you have any additional points to make. We're really not asking for a tremendous increase in the budget, except as related to the personnel. Any questions?
Wait, just going from 26 hours, 25, 26 hours to 30 hours, what?
I know that 24 hours.
Or was it 24 hours? 24 to 30, is that it? The current assessment? What do you find that needs to get done that isn't getting done now with the fewer hours, so that by adding 6 hours to his schedule, what other things are you hoping to get done that perhaps we're missing now?
I think for one thing that we can anticipate that our principal assessor will go out to the field more than he's been able to do that, because he's stuck at his desk. And I think he anticipates being able to go out to the field more, which will perhaps reduce the need for the consultants to some extent. He can go out and do some of the assessments himself, so that it's not built into the budget that's going to specifically reduce the number, but we want to make sure that that's available. So I think that's part of it. I also think, this is just me, that Dave stays a little bit late sometimes, and he works a little bit longer, and he's aware that he's putting in a little bit more hours in. So I mean, that's my opinion is he's realizing the amount of work that needs to be done, and he's the one that specifically asked for the increased numbers of hours.
So I think a couple of years ago, we were realizing that we were missing a lot of the real property valuations. There were a lot of things that had not been captured,
Yes.
regularly captured, and they were
Right.
kind of sporadic. And
Right.
it sounds like you've made a great progress on that, and part of it with the software as well as the, what is it, the flyover software or whatever you.
Oh, near map,
Near map
that's
thing.
one of them, yeah.
Yeah, some of that
We're
investment-
sharing that with some of the other.
Right, that investment is paid off, I
Yeah.
gather, to help really get
That's right.
some of that more up to date than it had been at
Yeah.
least. But that's where I was kind of going, was like, what other kind of things do you think, might improve, given, you maybe notice some gaps in what isn't being covered fully or something that, maybe the extra hours would help.
Yeah, I think so. Plus, I will say this, I understood that the whole change to, and maybe Scott, you can help me, the name of the new software that,
Oh, Vadar?
Vadar,
Yeah.
that has been a new thing in town that's used by multiple offices, and I've been told by the administrative assistant that there's a learning curve on that, and that everybody's faced with that. I think Bradley's office has been faced with that, a number of people have had. So it's not to say that's going to always be the case, but we are discovering some things. Our administrative assistant comes with a skill set that's pretty dogged. She's very eager to make sure everything's in the files correctly, and that we are capturing things, that we're putting lists and checklists in certain files, especially with Chapter 61 situations. She came up with some really good ideas for notifying town residents when they were going to have a cyclical assessment, sending out a postcard. We're going to be, seeing your property on it within the next week or two, and notifying people that people aren't just wandering around in their yards looking looking in their backyards. What other things? I think we're just looking at greater efficiencies. We're certainly looking at the original mandate of what's required within the office.
I don't know if you can speak to it. Could you pull up the narrative? I just wanted to have you talk a little bit about the revenue. Pursue the full review of the pilot agreement with City of Holyoke. for
Yeah,
example.
so you've heard me speak at the select board. Pilot stands for payment in lieu of taxes. The City of Holyoke, or Holyoke Water Works specifically, has owned property around the Ty Carmody Reservoir since the end of the 19th century. And the acquisitions have happened over time, various kinds of time that I can't even follow. How come they bought this land at this point in time? We have been eager to understand if the titles are correct, if the deeds are correct, and certainly are we actually capturing the properties correctly. Town residents have come personally to me and said, are we doing this right? And then the question of stumpage fees periodically. They've had timbering operations around the Ty Carmody Reservoir, and apparently, and I don't have the answer to this, but I'm understanding that there should have been fees paid based on the number of trees that were cut that we perhaps could have collected. Now, we may be too late, but we are in the process of trying to determine those answers. We did have an individual who's a title examiner all set to do this job, and unfortunately, for health reasons, had to back away. So I've got some questions out to some other people right now as who else could assist us with that, and that would have come out of the consultant's line. So that's what that is about right there. And the only other small thing under revenue was the fee structure for rollback taxes. Could we be looking at increasing that a little bit? It's $6 for rollback tax certificates and.
Do you mean a municipal lien certificate?
Maybe I do. I thought it was rollback taxes.
Well, one is issued all the time routinely, and the other is only for the withdrawal of enrolled land.
Is that for the withdrawal of chapter land?
Yeah.
That's the subject, but I think that happens irregularly
Okay.
as compared to refinancing the sale of property and a request to go back in the records and see if their back taxes owing.
Okay.
Title is municipal lien certificate.
Thanks.
Those are common, and I don't know what the common practice is for reimbursement.
I'm not apologizing, but my background is not as an assessor. So, that's the presentation, unless you have more
Thank
questions.
you. I'll just note that we wouldn't have any revenue if the assessors weren't on the ball. We wouldn't have any credibility if you didn't tend to the law and do it fairly. So it's really, really important.
That's right.
And that means keeping it up to date. And that's what makes it
Yeah.
really nice.
No, I think that, the assessors are certainly, that office is our first line of defense in a way. I mean, it's where our revenue stream starts, right?
And I think that there has been turnover in the employees in the office in the last several years for a number of reasons. And if we could get the solid personnel and give them the support they need and make sure that they're recognized for the kinds of contributions they can make, that's really where I'm at. I really respect the two people who are currently working in the office. I'm just going to add one thing. We have reason to call the BLA, what was that stand for? Board of Local Bureau of Local Assessments. And Linda had reason to call on a general question quite recently, and got some pretty high respect for our principal assessor. I think that was a very important thing for us to hear, that Dave Zagorski's been around for a while, and he's really wanting to do the best job, I think. We're working with him on that.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Pretty straightforward? All right. Good. Thank you, madam. All right. Next. You want to hang in here for a minute, Bradley? We'll go with Ron Lauren and our building department.
Just a few things with building. We are looking at implementing a townwide e-permitting, so we were able to move some of that. Right now, the $4,000 into the townwide IT budget. Eventually, we're looking at making that supportive as user fees. So when you would use the online system, we would adjust the fees so that the company would take it and pay for itself, so it's a cycle. We did add some building security cost, and then the tree warden budget I moved into the building department just because in the past it was not just because Ron is our tree warden, but because in the past it's been a separate budget. So if Ron doesn't run for re-election and someone else becomes tree warden, they wouldn't have any municipal background in the finance stuff, so at least they would have a point person to go to make sure that they do purchase orders and properly expend the funds. So we put that underneath it just because it would help out. So.
Can I quickly insert, I adjourn the meeting of the board with that. Excuse me, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. 8 o'clock. Thank you. Okay. All right. So Ron, you're up.
Yeah.
Who we have? Personnel services first?
Put my eyes in here.
Personnel first, or no?
Oh, yeah.
So,
How big of a raise is Art getting?
sorry.
How big of a raise is Art getting this year?
Oh, Art's not getting a raise. Actually, we might have to cut Art's hours.
Good luck with that.
My budget's been pretty much level funded for the last 5 years that I've been here. It's fine. We got plenty of money with what we have as far as operating expenses are concerned. In the past few years, I've had to take continuing ed classes because we're in a renewal cycle for the commissioner's licenses, but we're in a new cycle now, so I probably won't have to do a conference this year, which will save about $500. So like I said, we got plenty of money as far as that goes. Operating expense, I guess Scott's study showed a little bit of an increase in salary for the position. Not necessarily, I guess we went out to different communities and came up with that number, so I think that's the only increase.
Yeah, building security is something that we might want to look at cutting in the future, just and funding another way. But something that the costs have been, this year we've had a lot of unfortunately problem properties that we've had to take care
When a
of.
property gets condemned, it becomes the responsibility of the building department to secure that property, meaning board it up, winterize it, if there's any hazardous things in the yard that need to be dealt with, that has to get cleaned up. So that's where that money comes from. And then after that's done, then there's a lien that's put on the property, and then the monies come back to the town when the property's sold.
So would that end up being like a little mini revolving fund, or, I mean, should that be something like that?
Something like that, yeah. Yeah, at least having enough money in case we do have an emergency like we did with the house that we're still kind of working through, but, you know.
Yeah, that house there, yeah, that was the most recent one.
How much did that cost to board up?
The expenses on my end they came up to about $7,500. That included the plumber coming out to winterize, drain the boiler and drain all the radiators and stuff. And then the carpenter came out and boarded all the windows up and secured it, and then there was some dumpsters that were required because there was a fairly good sized structure that was falling over. It was close to the neighbor, so.
Where has that been paid out of so far?
That money?
Yeah.
The account's was set up a few years ago.
It was a town meeting article
It was,
for
yeah.
$20,000, I believe. And originally we had it in the general fund, then we moved it to special revenue to keep the balance going forward into the next fiscal year. So we've been using a little bit of money that we've received from the town meeting, and
So it's been in special revenue and now we're talking about putting it in.
So should we change it back or keep it the way it is, do you think?
your idea was to make it a budgeted item because we can't rely on, it's not gonna be self-sufficient
Right.
going forward, so we're gonna run out of money. So I think it is smart to reserve or budget some money every year for this purpose. Otherwise, we would have to keep doing town meeting articles.
Do we have some balance in there from this year? I mean, so
Yes.
we've used a fair amount of the 20,000 that we allocated?
I think there was some refunds or something that, we've
I
gotten.
think it was carryover from last year is what we used.
I swear there was something about, we had expenses and then we got reimbursed somehow from the state or something.
Well, that's what you're saying, if the properties sell.
Yeah, the Board of Health, they were able to get the bank to cover, to basically reimburse for the house on Cold Spring.
Uh-huh.
So, that money came back into the account, and then they ended up condemning another house that had to be boarded up on a different road in Southampton. So then that money came back out again, and that was used for the most current one.
But you take a lien and you're in first place before.
Exactly, yeah,
So-
first place.
So usually, at the end of the day, you get paid out.
Yeah.
At some point in time, right, whether it's, a lot of times these houses get a receiver assigned to them, and then the receiver prepares the property to the point where it's ready to be auctioned off. And then when it gets auctioned off, I believe the town is the first lien holder. A lot of times that's the property tax, back taxes that are owed, plus this here would be.
So I don't know, this almost feels like that ought to stay in special revenue. I don't know.
It's not something that's ever going to be an expense in the long run to the town, because we'll almost always get reimbursed.
Yeah.
Just a matter of when.
It's a matter of when, so it would almost be better flowing through a deposit account than
Yeah.
Should it be moved to a revolving fund instead of special revenue?
maybe. I don't even understand the distinction.
Revolving fund, we need to set a spending limit every fiscal year for it. But
Yeah,
it's
make that an
ideally self-sufficient money in, money out
Yeah.
for those
Yeah.
type of
Yeah.
accounts.
We would probably need to seed it a little bit though.
Every year, this.
No, you might have a negative or something, and then get recovered in a year.
So
I think
the fund needs
Massachusetts
to be
is
capitalized and then it'll run.
notoriously slow to go through foreclosure process.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, probably.
I have to insert something here because I went to the Board of Health meeting last night, and there have been so many problem properties in the town in the last couple of years. And I know you know every one of them.
Right.
And they're using, Charlie Konecki as a consultant on an hourly basis, and they're not able to collect the fees. Now, I know we're not talking about Board of Health right now, but there's you're gonna hear a whole different thing when they come to talk about their budget needs. And they have a revolving fund that is exhausted at this point.
Not exactly, I did look at it today.
Oh, you did?
It's doing pretty well.
Oh, is that right? Oh, well, so much for that. Good. I'm glad they talked to you, Bradley. Sorry to interrupt, but,
Yeah.
okay.
But yeah, maybe that's something we ought to think about, though. I mean, it's not that we would necessarily use it as a budget item every year. I don't know. It kind of depends, I guess. We've paid more attention to it. These houses have been around for a long time in this shape, right? It didn't happen
Right.
overnight. So it's just that we've spent time over the last year or two to try and enforce things better.
Right.
And take action compared to what we used to do, rather.
Essentially, it would come, if we did it this way, it would just come back to the general fund when we
Yeah.
do get it as a budgeted item, or we keep it as a special, or look at doing a revolving fund, and it would just be in a circle.
Seems like, yeah, I don't know.
Because typically if you have it in as a line in the budget, it's not money that comes back to you, right? So it's just money that's going out.
Right.
So if there's money that's going in and out, then yeah, I think it makes more sense.
Feels like a revolving fund to me, but I don't know. Anyway, we can study that one a little bit more, but that's good to know.
Yeah, it wasn't in place until we had an issue out on the pond section a few years ago, and that's where we went to town meeting, because, Ed was here at that point, and I went to see him and said, listen, it's our obligation to secure this property, and, put the X on the front, and, stuff
We
like
do.
that. So
How was
that's
this
how it all
handled
came
in the
about.
past when we didn't have this account?
I don't think it was handled.
I think we haven't taken a lot of action on these things. Like I say, these didn't happen this way overnight. I mean, many of them have been just not been dealt with for years. I mean,
Yep. So.
got to the bottom of the list of things to do. Just for those of us who may not know as much, just tell us how this works with your gas and your plumbing inspectors and all of that. There's a fee that's charged for their work, and they
Yeah.
get a portion of that fee?
Yeah, so in my gas too, so I get, I use my own vehicle and for inspections and whatever else I'm, doing. So I get a monthly stipend of $240, which covers my fuel costs and, wear and tear or whatever on my truck.
That comes from the operating
That comes from
expenses,
the
right?
operating budget, so that comes up to $2,880 a year for the gas stipend for me. And that leaves roughly 2010. That leaves 2010 for the other expenses that we incur. Meaning code books, pens, pencils, any training that I attend, stuff like that. Like I said, that's more than enough. As far as the plumbing inspector, he has to do continuing education for his plumbing inspector's license. So that's always been paid out as as an expense. It's $1,000 a year. $1,000 a year. So when the plumbing inspector attends continuing education classes, a lot of times it's out in Greenfield, because I think that's where whether it's a union hall or whatever that he has to go to. So in addition to the cost of that, he also keeps track of his he keeps track of his mileage, and then gets reimbursed for his mileage to and from. So basically it's to and from the town hall. That's how that's measured.
That's just for the plumber and not,
Yeah, the electrical inspector he's never been set up that way. This was all done prior to me coming here, and it's just been continued to be done this way, so.
and so again, when they go out to do an inspection, there's a fee for that inspection?
That's right, he gets a percentage of the plumbing permit, or the electrical inspector gets a percentage of the electrical permit. They don't get reimbursed for mileage when they do their inspections. It's just a straight fee. So.
And what kind of account does that come out of? Is that a revolving fund, or is that is? Okay.
Yeah, like I said, it's just, I mean, unfortunately, building activities are down a little bit too this year, so we're seeing a little bit of a decrease in permit activities, so I calculate, I'm just talking about residential permits, I'm down about 4% from last year, because we run on a calendar year, so January to January. So there's definitely a slowdown. So 2023, I did 330 residential permits, and in 2024, I did 317 permits. So, like I said, it's about a 4% decrease. So.
I had a question about something in the narrative. You mentioned to cover the cost of software upgrades, the building department will introduce a user fee, and this fee will fund enhanced training programs, equipment modernization, and improved public outreach initiatives. I just wondered if you...
Yeah, I haven't come up with an actual fee yet, because it's still kind of a concept at this point. I think that's assuming that, I mean, Scott's vision is to basically pull off the whole town into this software, so that all the different departments and boards are kind of part of the process. So like, you know, when a house gets built, there's sign-offs that are required. And right now, the applicant just goes from, you know, whether it's the planning board signing off, they have a piece of paper, and they, you know, the Conservation Commission, so they'll all be users if it goes through the way that we think it might go through. They'll all be users of this software, which will be quite a bit of money. I'm not sure what the number is, but you know, it's gonna probably make it more efficient for the applicant, and it's also gonna be probably a little bit more. There's going to be, you know, a little bit more checks and balances as far as like when the boards review, and then they'll sign off before the permit can actually be issued. There'll be like a mechanism in place that won't allow the permit to be issued until, say, the planning board says, okay, we're good, we're satisfied, and then they'll lift their hold on the permit. Conservation, if they have to review, say, for example, house permits all get reviewed by the Conservation Commission. So they would lift their hold once they were satisfied. And then the highway department with driveway permits, they would lift their hold after they review and issue a driveway permit. So with that added expense, there would be a fee to, you know, that would be covered through the person that's applying for the permit. I mean, I don't think it would be a massive fee, but it'll be something. There's other towns that are already doing it. We just have to kind of look at Hadley, for example, is doing it, or Easthampton, and see what, you know, what their fees are. I mean, our other goal is to, at some point, eliminate paper applications altogether. One thing we're going to do is set up a computer out in the hallway, so that if people don't have access to a computer and they want to do online, they'll be able to come to the town hall, sit down out in the hallway, and then somebody, if they need help, you know, there'll be somebody available to help them too, so.
Great. Can you talk a little bit about the online permitting you have now? What does that get somebody when they go online? What do they get right now?
Right now, they get the entire application, and they
For a building permit?
Yeah, so they fill everything out, the state forms, all of the different forms that are required, whether it's a homeowner exemption, or it's the industrial accident board's form to, you know, that all deals with workers' comps and stuff like that. So that's all online. They fill all of that out. Plus, they can submit attachments if you know, if they have, you know, house plans or additions or remodel. They can attach that to the application, and then it gets submitted. Then we review it, and then, like I said, if it requires sign-offs, then.
But then, so the difference, if I'm hearing you right, the difference is going to be that this is a first line right now. We've got a piece of the online permitting, but then once it's in the system, then it's paper by paper by paper around to the different
Exactly,
boards,
yeah,
right?
Like the fire department has to review.
Correct, okay.
So this would all be done.
So now the new software would eliminate.
Yeah, everybody would be a user, exactly. And then they would, like I said, there would be different levels of holds on the permit until the fire department reviewed, the smoke detectors or whatever, and then they would lift their hold. So, I mean, it's a good way to do things, and it's probably more efficient for the applicant too, because now they're not looking for the fire chief or looking for the conservation agent or, the planning board trying to, put stuff in the mailbox or whatever, and then, so it'll be, I think, a more efficient and better checks and balances. But that's not gonna be part of my budget, I guess. That's
No.
gonna go into
That'd be a bigger
That's
budget.
gonna go into the computer budget. so.
Yeah, exactly. No, but that's good to know. I mean, just to understand that we've made a step in the right direction already with some online permitting. But
Yeah, well,
it doesn't go very
100%,
far, right? It
yeah.
stops at a certain point, and then we're still back to just manually passing paper around and.
Yeah, and that's only for like house permits usually. I mean, like, if somebody's putting a new kitchen in, they're not gonna go before the planning board. They're not gonna go before the conservation.
Yeah.
That's more geared towards additions. Ground mount solar has to go before the planning board, so that would be treated that way. Any of these ADUs that we're gonna start seeing, but yeah, there's always, like, depending on what kind of project it is, there's gonna be different boards involved, like the Board of Health, for example. If it's an ADU, that they're probably gonna be looking at the septic system, is it adequate to handle another bedroom? The water department, they have to sign off and make sure there's potable water before a permit can be issued. So it's a good concept at this point.
And it's records retention, so once we
Right.
move to electronic, we don't have to have filing cabinet after filing cabinet
Yeah.
in perpetuity. And it also allows access for the public for all the information and other departments, so.
Yeah, so the public can see what, if somebody happens to be driving around and say, oh, I wonder if there's a permit there. Well, I think they'll be able to view that. So it's gonna be.
So this is a good summary. Refresh my memory. I think we funded this acquisition and its first year of operation already.
Yep.
Good.
Okay.
I'm good.
Any comments or questions?
You're welcome.
No? All right. All right, very good. Thanks, Ron.
All right, thank you.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Next up, last but not least, the accountant.
The loud one in the corner.
Yeah. Brad, on the accounting department here.
One thing I just want to point out with the accountant budget is Bradley is a contractual employee, so this is assuming an increase from 34 to 35 and consistent with the rate step. So, but we're still working on, we have to get you officially negotiated and signed, so. And then the assistant town accountant is still at 19 hours, so there's really no changes for that part.
So the assistant is non-benefited? Part.
That's right. It was originally 21 hours, and when we hired Tom, we reduced it to 19.
Yeah, so really the only increases are the salary accounts. Independent audit is our yearly audit expenses. We are told how much it's going to be, and then it might change depending on the scope of their audit. So in our contract, there are no concrete numbers that we can rely on. It's really whatever our auditing firm tells us we need to pay. My town accountant expenses, I need to pay for general office supplies, and I have educational programs, the MMAAA education courses in March. I would go with my assistant, but with him, I decided that I should be the only one needing to go. He is all set with his role in the department, and when I'm away, he can take over my duties to review payroll or post expenses, whatever. So I think would be smarter for just to budget for my educational program. In the past, I've taken additional education classes, which I'm not taking in fiscal year 26, because I've taken just about all the ones I need to, and I have all the notes I need to review if I ever need to. So
you've got your licensing as a certified accountant.
I need to do that.
You need to do that.
So I need to go to the March education program,
Okay.
which It's about $300 or $350 per year.
And what about any classes still related to the procurement officer position?
Well, I've taken those classes and I've been
Yeah.
certified.
But I mean, do you need to renew
I believe.
things on that?
Yes,
or-
I
yeah.
would have to.
Continuing
3 to 5
education
years,
or
I
something
think.
maybe?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So when
Yeah.
that comes up, I can
Yeah.
budget
Okay.
for it.
You should be okay this year, though.
I believe so.
All right.
So again, office supplies and 1099 reports every year. We need to report to the IRS and to individual vendors who we pay over $600 and that are taxable, as in sole proprietors or partnerships or lawyers, those type of vendors that we pay. I need to send out a bunch of envelopes. Our accounting software support, in the past we were paying SoftWrite, and in fiscal year 25 we budgeted for paying the accounting software support to SoftWrite just in case, so when we are closing fiscal year 24 we still have access and have help for that service. In the coming years we're going to be using Vadar exclusively, so that I believe will be a town-wide expense, not a accounting specific expense.
Makes sense, yeah. That's amazing how a lot of these items have been somehow over the years kind of shoveled into various departments, whereas, you know, just intuitively, a lot of these things are town-wide that benefit many departments. It's like, I'm not quite sure how the thinking had been over time, but, you know, and I guess honestly, you know, seeing it laid out differently, it allows us, at least allows me, and I've been however many budget years through here, 5 years of budgets, I guess. It just presents a clearer understanding of how it all goes together, because I think before it's been so muddled, we didn't really see the duplication or the best place where it should sit. So I'm thinking this is much more helpful.
With SoftWrite, I was logging in and inputting all the AP warrants. Now with Vadar, we've given responsibility to multiple committees and departments to input their own and run reports for their own accounts.
Yeah.
So we are spreading it out and allowing everyone to use our financial software.
That's good. And are you finding with the software that you're having fewer errors to correct too from?
Well, I still need to review everyone's inputs.
Right.
But everyone's doing pretty well. If I do see an error, I'll correct it and I'll let them know if it's a recurring issue.
Yeah.
But everyone's doing pretty well, and I feel bad that I have slightly less work to do.
Hey, don't say that.
Well, we're just getting started.
I know.
I think we saw a spreadsheet early on in this presentation that you got a lot of work to do on these special revenue and grant ones.
So I don't want to feel like I'm have my feet on the desk and relaxing while everyone else is doing the
Never
work.
noticed that.
Well, my nap time is usually 2 to 4. So
Okay, we'll remember that.
So, yes, Vadar has its benefits over our prior software, but there's still a lot to learn and
Sure.
things that we can discuss with Vadar to make it better for us.
Yeah, are we using, I assume we're not using all the modules of Vadar yet?
Yeah, the next big step is going to be having receipts entered by the individual departments. And then once we get that done, it's a matter of looking at maybe budgeting software, purchase order system software, which we don't have the modules for.
Okay.
So,
But that's all under Vadar?
yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's different little bits and pieces you can do.
Yeah, sort of like a little Lego set.
So just along those lines, I do know that Kathy in the assessor's office mentioned that it doesn't transfer Excel spreadsheets easily, or is that something?
I'm still trying to figure out when we're running reports for accounts or anything, how we can convert it into an Excel file.
Okay.
I'm not, I imagine we could talk to Vadar and maybe they have a way of doing that.
Okay.
But right now, there's no quick, easy option to convert a PDF or just a regular report into the Excel.
All right, so the one change is just hooking you up for 1 extra hour?
Yes. Which currently I work 8, 10 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, Monday through Thursday, and then 4 hours, 9 to 1 on Fridays. So that's technically $35 a week. Currently, I'm not complaining, just it works out for me for my schedule to get here early.
Sure. Okay. All right, seems pretty straightforward. Anybody have any questions on this one?
Seems to be a smooth running operation, from what I see.
No, I think things have, definitely come together. It's really good to have a person sitting in that seat and keeping on top of things, so we really appreciate the work you've been doing.
I stepped out for a moment when you first started, but is your assistant, got plenty of work for that individual, and he's got elected?
He joined in October, and he, right around Thanksgiving, or just after Thanksgiving, he emailed us saying that he needed some time away to
Oh, that's right.
go on
Ski trip.
leave of absence to train skiers in Colorado. And we considered it and said, yes, he may, and he'll be back, I believe, early April.
Oh, he's still not from my back yet.
I think it's March.
Well, he said up through March, so
We'll
I'm
have to
not
double
sure
check
what
with
that
him.
means.
It's a pretty long leave of absence there.
Depends on the weather.
Yeah, well, I'm assuming that, honestly though, kidding aside, but on that special revenue and capital list that you had there, grants, sorting out and what grants have been closed out over the last decade, that's going to take a lot of unraveling, I think, just to find the original documentation. Some of these.
Yeah, it's just, we have money in certain accounts.
Right.
What do we do with it?
Yeah, are we
Can we
allowed to
absorb
use
it, or do we have to send it back?
Can we use it, or do we have to send it back to somebody or not?
State grant, maybe the state doesn't care anymore.
Yeah.
But it would be smart for them to get the money back. But-
Yeah.
So we have to individually look at all the accounts. I did quick research for each account to see
Yeah.
when the last time
Right.
we used it, when we
Right.
got it.
Yeah.
It's just,
And some of them may or may not have, clarity in terms of, how it can be used, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah. But again, a lot of these reimbursables, it wouldn't be a matter of returning anything. It would have been whatever we've put in our receipts for and gotten reimbursed, hopefully, but, I don't know. Okay, well, I think that's kind of it for now. So thank you, everybody. I think this has been a good
It's not midnight yet.
session. Yeah, we did pretty good. 8:30.
I think I understand what was presented.
Yeah, I think we do too. So we have, just to get us up to date, so our next meeting is going to be on the 18th, which is next Tuesday. We'll start off with a regular select board meeting, and I don't think we'll have a terribly heavy-duty agenda. But we will have, Margaret Rushing will come and give us a little overview on the HRHS budget and what they're facing at the school level, so we have a better idea of that kind of unknown quantity.
About what time?
We'll probably, I'm gonna say, I don't know, 6:30 to 7. We've got a COA scheduled at 7:30, so we'd plan an hour and a half on the board meeting. I don't know if we need that much.
I don't think we need that much.
I don't know if we need that much, so I'm gonna say maybe those are all gonna shift up about a half an hour. So 6:30-ish, I would say, 6:30, 6:45, that we'd have the school, and then we'll go right into the COA budget and then the police budget. Those are the two on next week. And then after that, the 25th, we've got 4 others, health, fire, highway, and water. And then some in early March as well, so. But anybody have any comments and thoughts?
Signatures from last meeting for the PDF, for the change in rates for the,
Oh, for me? Select board.
yeah, Jen wants majority.
Oh, that's right.
Do you want to explain about other boards or committees that aren't in this current schedule?
So there's a couple that are kind of out there. I was hoping to kind of put them in on our second meetings. Like I think planning has like $500, so it's not a lot, but we're gonna be looking at some bigger items coming down the road, so.
There's no staffing request?
Conservation we have scheduled. What was the other one that there's 2 or 3 others that CBC.
And I don't think you mentioned almonds either, and we have accounts that we
Right.
throw the steps of.
Right. So there's a few smaller ones that we have to kind of put together. Yeah, that'll be probably there should be relatively quick, so.
Okay, you guys just see this. This is the,
Does the town clerk have a budget? Is that person going to present? It's probably on the list. I
Yes,
missed it.
they're in March. Yep. Well thought out schedule, so good. I think I'm the only one who has to sign this one, yeah? PCF?
I think so.
PRF. Want the date on it from last meeting? The last meeting, or not today's date?
That's a blue.
It's 4th, right?
City's alignment.
Oh, I stole your pen.
Compared to the blue, yeah. Sorry. You want, when did we meet? The
4th. Yep.
Here's the
This is Chris's.
Oh, that's yours, mine. That goes to Scott. Go back. All right, all right.
That's sort of payroll to sign?
Good. Thank you very much, guys.
No, it's not your department. You haven't done
Payroll and the
Is it off?
Drop down
It's off?
today.
Oh,
I'm not
Hold
not
on.
yet.
Sorry, guys, we are adjourned at 8:33.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.